What's the wildest info that a student dropped when asked a fun fact about themselves? I teach middle school and this one still takes the cake. He said that his mum and dad have the same parents. I asked him to clarify because I didn't understand what he was saying and he said, "I only have one set of grandparents, they had the same parents." I quickly moved to the next student so no one else would realize that this kid just told the class that his parents were siblings. I talked to him about it the next day in private and he said that he got it mixed up. His parents don't have the exact same parents, they shared a dad. I felt so much better when the mum called me to let me know her elderly stepfather married her husband's elderly mother after they were born. Still weird, but much better. I had a student tell me that sometimes his dad got drunk and asked his mum for things. As I was starting to tell him to stop and that he didn't need to elaborate any further, he continued with, like soup, and then he yells it, like, soup! It took every bit of restraint not to laugh. It's been years and years since that happened, but I still laugh whenever I think about it. Not a teacher, but this happened when I was 17 at school camp during a bonding exercise. The teacher said, "Tell us 2 truths and 1 lie about yourself, and we have to guess the lie." And this one weird kid went, "I like PlayStation, I like Doritos, and I'm an alcoholic." The teacher said, "Oh, well, the lie is clearly that you're an alcoholic." "Got ya, I play Xbox." My gosh, the look on that teacher's face. In my public speaking class at a community college, we had to get up and do a speech about an experience that really changed our lives, or an important memory and how it made us who we are. On the first day, a guy who was a veteran volunteered to go first. He proceeded to talk about the day he was captured and a victim of the unspeakable act by an enemy soldier, and how he now goes around and helps other soldiers with the Wounded Warrior Project. It was difficult for anybody to follow that. He's one of the nicest guys I've ever met. "My arm is effed, y'all," in the deepest southern drawl, and proceeded to wildly swing his effed up arm around. He was 12 and had Erb's palsy and also got detention that day. He might be one of my favorite students. Not a teacher, but I just did a first aid course. During introductions, say your name and 1 fact about yourself, etc., this one dude said proudly that he had over 300,000 of unpaid parking tickets. Is that possible? Isn't there a certain point where you just get arrested? Not that I think you should enforce that much debt on people. Surely their car should have just been impounded long before that. Once we were going around a circle during percussion camp in the front ensemble, and my teacher goes, "Hello everyone, my name is Paul and I've crapped my pants as an adult." That was definitely one of the weirder ones that I've heard. I just said my dad steals cars. It was something my parents always told us growing up as a joke. The teacher just laughed and said, "That's nice, sweetie." A student told me that there was a chapter dedicated to him in dental surgery textbooks because of a very rare disorder that he had as a child. I might still have that essay. My brother had something like this. When he was somewhere around 9 or 10 years old, he'd had to have 12 teeth surgically removed. He just had too many growing too quickly. It was so crazy that the oral surgeon apparently negotiated a deal with my father. The surgeon would completely pay for my brother's surgery in exchange for taking a couple of extra x-rays and lots of photos, to be published in an academic journal of some sort. During French class, a guy in my class said that he liked stabbing children. He meant that he fences, but didn't know the exact translation for that. During an introductory activity for my new class, a boy aged 9 got up and said, "My dog has to wear a cone on its head because Dad had his bollocks cut off." I was an ESL teacher in Indonesia, and a student once told me every morning she cleaned the doo-doo on her bed. I asked her to clarify, worried that she had a serious digestive issue. She answered, "I brush my teeth, wash face, and clean bedsheet." Her accent made the word sheet sound like a different word. A kid in my kindergarten class said, "My pee-pee fell off at Disneyland." I did not ask any follow-up questions. Not a teacher, but a few years ago on the first day of school, this kid in one of my classes casually answered, "I have a restraining order on my dad." That's actually a smart move. Now everyone in class knows that his father can't come and pick him up. "My dad clogged the toilet this morning and that's why I'm feeling frustrated," said a 5-year-old child. I will say the question was, "How are you doing this morning?" but I could barely keep from laughing out loud. I have IBS. My toddler once told visiting friends that, "Daddy takes long poops." I mean, I was having a flare-up and had some extended bathroom sessions, but dang, little dude, not cool. I'm terrified and amused about what he might share at school in the near future. I'm not a teacher, but I was a helper in a middle school classroom. A teen who seemed uninterested said with no hesitation that she could chug an entire bottle of beer. She got expelled later that year for keeping substances in her locker. I'm not a teacher, but this guy in my class named Shane has this medical condition that causes him to grow tons of hair at an early age. Full beard in middle school. He'd say, "I'm Shane and I'm very hairy." A student once told my wife that her daddy had a very special device that he had to blow into to start his truck. We did one of those two truths, one lie bits. A girl stood up and said, "I've never been out of the country. I'm a twin. I love playing sports." I knew this girl beforehand, and she didn't have a twin, so I picked that one. Nope, she had a conjoined twin that died in utero and had to be surgically removed, and she's now missing the last vertebrae on her spine. Showed us the scar and everything. Apparently the lie was the first one, as she had been to Mexico. I had a student say a really similar thing. They said, "I really like reading books. I had a stroke 3 years ago, and I'm a triplet." This was the first few days at a new school for me, and his twin sister was in my class, so I was like, "He's a twin, right?" "Nope, they're triplets, but his brother's in a different school because he's incredibly smart. This kid was in a special program 1 day a week because he was smart too, so his brother must have been a genius." His sister just sat there like, "Yep, one brother's a genius and the other's brilliant, and I'm just me." She was a fantastic kid but had a lot of self-esteem issues for obvious reasons. The lie was that he liked reading books. True that he'd had a stroke as well. I teach ESL, and every lesson we start the class by sharing something good that happened to us over the last week or so. Needless to say, kids share the most random things ever. I have many weird stories because of that. We enforce a rule that they need to share good things so they don't start one-upping each other over whose grandma had the worst death. And one day a student said, "I was riding my bike over the weekend when I fell." I could see where it was going, but didn't have enough time to try and enforce the rule when he just spat out, "I fell over a wired fence and cut my neck, and it just kept gushing blood. A lot of blood." I reminded him that we were only sharing good news when he said, "It's good because I'm still alive." I had a good laugh and agreed, but the damage was done. Every kid after him wanted to share about the most horrific injury they had or witnessed. A kid shared that he'd been to juvie multiple times and was currently on probation. Then he pulled up his pants enough so that everyone could see his ankle monitor. That was something. Not me, but my brother. He told the class, "Last night my family ate beaver for dinner." I was much older and had left home by this point. The class laughed and the teacher accused him of lying. The principal was brought into it and my mother had to go in for a meeting. She chewed them up one side and down the other because we had a cousin who was a trapper and he had sent a batch of beaver thighs for the family to enjoy. And although my brother was telling the truth, he told me later that he did say it for the effect of disrupting the class. Well, is it weird that now the narrator is just kind of wondering what beaver tastes like? And no, not that kind, you preverts. I'm genuinely curious about the actual animal in this story. I mean, you're killing them anyway, why not eat them too? My friend is really quiet. He doesn't really talk unless talked to. He's really cool though and has some things he enjoys doing. Literally second year I knew him, the teacher asked him to drop a fun fact about himself, and he said he's a professional bowler with a 300 best, and I was like, "Why haven't you told me this? That's amazing!" I guess it just never came up. I knew him for a whole year and I never knew that. Had students, aged 11, sharing strategies for dealing with difficult emotions, one at a time in a big circle. One girl talked about digging her nails into her face whenever she was feeling stressed or anxious, and I had to explain to the class that that was not a good coping strategy. When I was in my first year at university, my law and society professor made each student get up, say his or her name, and tell why they picked law school. Well, a guy got up, said his name, and the professor interrupted him by asking, "Are you related to X?" And the guy said, "Yes, professor, he's my grandfather." Then the professor got excited and started talking about what a great guy X was, and that he hadn't heard of him in years. Then the professor asked how he was, and this student replied, "Well, he's dead, sir." The whole class was trying to hold in their laughter. It pretty much broke the class on the first day. I'm not a teacher. This person who told the story was in a class with me as a young adult. Someone in a class told everyone about how his grandparents were arrested for keeping a bunch of adopted children in cages. He said that he used to play with the kids when he was young, but he was too young to understand that the conditions they were in weren't normal. They kept kids in cages and in locked rooms for years before they were discovered and arrested. Yeah, that was a fun fact. I've had my hand up a sheep's bum. That one shocked me slightly. Child of a farming family, helping with lambing season. I was in one of the first small required classes for my teaching degree, and everyone in the class was studying to teach. It was day 2 or 3, and we were doing a get-to-know-you activity, where we shared something about ourselves. I don't remember the exact question, but it had something to do with what do you regret or take back. A guy came in late, when almost everyone has the answers to the question, and the professor asked him the questions, and he thought for a moment and said, "I regret letting my friend talk me into dropping A." The class was silent for a good 20 seconds until the professor said, "Maybe next time we only share things that are legal." I hadn't seen him in any other teaching classes since. I still laugh about it to this day. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. In the context of having students introduce themselves one by one to a new boy in a small high school class, a girl said that her parents got her a nose job and a chest job. That's a two-way tie for me. One was, "I have 2 thumbs on this hand," and "I'm raising cockroaches in my closet to sell to the reptile shop." My dad had a student tell him during the fun fact question in detail about how his goldfishes died that morning and how he experimented on their corpses. He had pictures on his phone of the skin off and the intact skeleton next to it. He's a successful taxidermist now, so silver linings, I guess? My first year as an earnest and ideological teacher in a very rough, underserved area. I got all the students in a circle on the first day to talk about what we'd done that summer. I pointed to a student who had been engaged with me before in class and said, "What did you do this summer that could inspire us?" His answer was, "I did the last 2 months of a sentence for stealing a car." Okay, so I hadn't expected that. I pointed to another student and said, "Okay, that's great, let's talk about what you did this summer." "Yep, I had such a good summer. I went to camp and…" Let me stop lying. "I did the last 2 months of a sentence with that guy because I stole a car with him." Okay, mine was actually cute and kind of funny. I was teaching 5th grade and this kid, white as paper, goes, "My name is blank, but you can call me LeBron." He had an obsession with LeBron James, and I did in fact call him LeBron whenever I wanted to get his attention. Great kid. I'm a teacher from the UK, form tutor to a Year 7 class, 11-year-olds. To get to know each other on the first day, I had them take it in turns to say their name, which primary school they've come from, and an interesting fact, like favourite food or colour. We get to the last kid in class, and his fact was that he had 6 fingers in one hand. Coolest kid ever. That's like my brother. He was born with 6 fingers on each hand, but he had them removed as a baby. When he found out at around age 10, he got so mad because he could have been really cool and really fast at typing. I taught elementary school in the past few years. One kid told me he was a dragon when he was born, but changed into a human as he got older. He was absolutely convinced and couldn't be persuaded otherwise. Okay, so I had psychology back in the spring semester before COVID hit, and I sat next to a girl who I was good friends with from high school. Professor asks her for a fun fact, and she said, "I like to watch people get cut open." She obviously said it for effect, but she cleared it up by saying she liked watching videos of people getting plastic surgery because it was satisfying to watch. Someone shared that when he wiped in the bathroom that morning that there was blood on the toilet paper. Huh. Introducing ourselves around our 10th grade social studies class, and my intro went, "Hi, I'm Katrina, I'm blah blah blah, and I really like trees. Like, I swear I have a tree fetish." The teacher gives me a what the frick look and goes, "Okay," and quickly moves on. I confused that word with the word obsession. Still weird, but holy smokes, I did not mean to say that I was attracted to trees that way. Not a teacher, but on the first day of 9th grade, we had to form a circle and say one thing about ourselves that we thought was unique. When it was this guy's turn, let's call him Mike, Mike stands up and says in a really serious tone, "My mum and dad grow," the word for green herb. His house got raided the next day and his dad got arrested somehow. "I know a lot about medieval torture equipment." Is it possible to be fascinated about the subject matter and not be a serial killer in the making? I guess maybe you could just be channeling it into something really alternative in the bedroom, I don't know. Even though I'm a professor, nothing that's ever been revealed by this question has ever been as awkward or uncomfortable as the occasion that happened when I was still a student. This was when I was in my MFA program for creative writing. If you've never been in an arts program before, it probably won't surprise you to learn that they can attract some weird personalities. It was the first day of a fiction workshop, and the professor decided that he wanted us all to share something interesting about ourselves. And for some reason, one girl, Ashley, decided that this would be a good opportunity for her to tell us about her long history of substance use and the equally long period of mental psychosis she went through as a result of it. She didn't do this as a quick answer either, but as a long, drawn-out list of every single substance she had ever experimented with, followed by a catalogue of every single delusion she had suffered as a result. The only one I can remember now is that at one point she became convinced she was a millionaire and that her family was hiding her money from her. All of this was delivered in a monotone monologue with her eyes glazed over that lasted at least 5 minutes, which was met at the end with a long, awkward silence before the professor said, "Well, that definitely was something interesting," and then moved on to the next person. I was teaching a 10th grade honors English class once, and this pleasant young woman busted out the C word. I hadn't had any trouble with her whatsoever, so I was a bit shocked. The whole class went silent. I told her she couldn't use that word in class, and she was confused as to which word I was referring to. Finally, I said, "The C word," and she repeated it and then admitted she didn't know there was anything wrong with it because her parents use it at home all the time. The rest of the class let her know it was bizarre that she was using it. Not a teacher, but a guy in a handful of my high school classes used to always say he met Ron Jeremy if the class was doing 2 truths and a lie. He wasn't lying and would always show the class the picture they took together. I tried to make conversation with a 6th grade boy who didn't have any friends in my class. I asked him what music he listens to, and he said, "Mukbang soundscapes." If you don't know, mukbang is when people eat a ridiculous amount of food in one setting. It was weird. I don't ask for a fun fact, but on the first day I always ask, "What's your most recent obsession?" Low stakes, building affinity networks, stuff like that. In my first semester, a student said, "air," as in, oxygen. I'm a student, and a kid in my class said that he loves chicken nuggets and then sat down and didn't say anything to anyone else for a month. I have so much admiration yet confusion for him. I have 17 piercings, but only 6 are readily visible. One guy who said, "I love," and then he said the R word. Sometimes I do it, sometimes me and my friends like to get together and listen to people doing it. Some of my favorite R-worders include Tupac, Dr. Dre, Eminem, Biggie. My favorite grape song is English wasn't his first language. He had us in the first half, I'm not gonna lie. I'm a trainer at a bank and I've learned some really interesting things about my colleagues doing icebreakers. One guy used to be in a pretty successful metal band. Another one can solve a Rubik's Cube in under 2 minutes, and yes, I made him prove it. One woman was a professional pianist for a while, and another can read tarot cards. I'm seriously thinking of putting on an employee talent show. One of my students said, "You'll think less of me if you Google me." I remember one kid using this question as an opportunity to explain that he believed in the flying spaghetti monster. I'm not a teacher, but first day of high school when we did introductions, one of the popular girls said, "Hi, I'm Macy and I'm trash. No, wait, I'm fan trash." And then proceeded to explain that she read smutty fanfics to every and any of the teachers that asked what fan trash was. We were 11, British high school. As a follow-up to the question being asked, teachers that put everyone on the spot like this? What the frick? I mean, it's mostly a thing of what can I attach to your name to make you stand out against the 200 other students that I'm teaching this semester? Also, it's a good way to burn 20 minutes of a class period when you don't know how much you should prepare for your lesson yet and you want to save going over the syllabus for a bit later. The first day of Intro to Literature during my freshman year of college. When asked an interesting fact about myself, I said, "I refuse to bungee jump." Slightly confused, my professor took the bait. He replied, "That's sort of random. Why do you refuse to bungee jump? Is it a certain fear?" To which my reply was, "To be honest with you, sir, a broken rubber brought me into this world, so I'm going to make damn sure one doesn't take me out of it." Luckily, the professor was a chill guy. The entire class exploded with laughter, and it was a good time. After a winter half-term, the teacher asked us all, "How was your break?" My class got silent for a few glorious seconds, and when it was my turn, I said, "Well, my granddad died and my dad got married." Yes, in that order. My teacher asked my mum if it was true at a parent evening a few days later. "Sorry for the response you got, Mr. Moore." My friend, when asked this question, said that tickling his pickle was his passion. I had a student who had an identical twin brother 2 years younger than him. His dad was a pro athlete who had the money to freeze an egg after the embryo split. His wife then carried both at separate times. I had an in-depth conversation with an almost 6-year-old about being a secret werewolf hunter at night. The student described how they tracked and often made friends with werewolves. Also demonstrated a stunning amount of knowledge about the moon. And for folks wondering about the vibrant lying, this is very typical for young students and one of their relational avenues for assessing adult reactions. and imaginative storytelling is an important developmental trajectory. At certain points, children start telling stories that they themselves know aren't true, which can be super annoying, and is also a wonderful window into a particularly complex part of cognitive development. He shared the fact that he had a TV in his bedroom. He was 17. I think his name was Carter. He stood up and said, this was in college by the way, "One time I did the deed with a girl in the bathroom." He was expelled.
Teachers of Reddit, what's the funniest reason you've had to send someone to the principal's office? Not entirely the principal's office because they were kindergartners, but two boys turned off the lights in the bathroom, had their pants around their ankles, chasing each other around in the dark and peeing on each other. That was a weird one to explain to the parents. I work at a daycare and we couldn't figure out why the bathroom smelled like pee so bad even though it gets cleaned twice a day. After a few days, one of the teachers was tying a boy's shoes when she looked into the bathroom and saw another boy peeing directly into the floor drain. Apparently half the class was peeing down the drain instead of into the toilet. Unfortunately enough for young kids, peeing is funny, and they tend to go places with that. A kid dropped a folder full of Xeroxed copies of his hairy butt. Turns out he'd been taping them to people's lockers all over school. Maybe someone told him he had a nice butt and he felt obliged to share it with the rest of the world. My dad worked as a teacher in a school for misguided youth. On the first day, he wrote his name on the board as new teachers do, and when he turned his back towards the class, a kid had lit his desk on fire with hairspray and was just laughing. 3-foot-high flame no more than a foot away from him. I had a 6th grader who was, just to paint the picture, a human incarnation of Ralph Wiggum, who wanted to get out of class so desperately that first he raised his hand and said his ears were ringing and he needed to go to the nurse. Sorry kid, not falling for it. 20 seconds later, he raised his hand and said his tongue was burning and needed to go to the nurse. Not falling for it, Ralph. 10 seconds later, he had blurry vision. He was squishing his eyes with his hands. No dice, kid. And then, in the grand finale, he stands with a flourish and yells so loud that teachers all down the hall stuck their heads out into the hallway. "My dong is bleeding!" We all stood mouths agape until the one wise guy in the class adds, "And you want the nurse to look at it?" What did this kid have to get out of class so bad for that he felt the need to yell that to everybody? I didn't send him to the office, but one of my favorite moments was one time I was working with a small group while other students worked on independent stuff around the room. One student was working pretty close to me and obviously made a mistake because he exclaimed, "Crap!" except he didn't say crap. So I said, "Excuse me, Ty? What was that?" And he says, "Oh, I didn't say what you think I said, miss." And I said, "Oh, good. What did you say?" He says, "I said shit," obviously thinking very hard. And then just stared at me horrified. I was trying so hard not to laugh, but I just told him, "I thought that's what you said. Please don't use that language in my classroom." We were doing sketch comedy in 6th grade a few years back, and seeing as it was a nice day, we went outside to practice. From across the field, I see one of my students very clearly and aggressively trying to put his junk on a prone classmate. When I asked him, he said it was for his sketch, and he was playing a character named the Iron Teabag. The best was the follow-up text from my boss saying, "I had to Google what teabagging was before I met with the kid." Sounds like they may have an instant classic on their hands. I had a kid show up to band with a massive black adult toy instead of his clarinet, and he honestly thought I wouldn't notice. Dude, everybody's gonna notice. Not a teacher, but a classmate in my drafting class was sent to the dean for 3D rendering a massive dong. My teacher saw it, commended him for his work, and asked him to print it out. He then stapled it to a referral and sent him to the dean. Glorious. Not a teacher, but we had an older lady as a science substitute in 8th grade. It was a hot June day and the windows were open. We were on the 2nd floor. My friend told the sub when she walked in the classroom that Jimmy had fallen out the window. When the sub looked out the window, she saw Jimmy lying on the ground contorted, and she passed out. We never got a chance to explain to her that it was a joke. He had just laid down on the sidewalk under the window. The two boys got suspended and that sub never came back. You guys probably left her with a very traumatic memory. I'm a male 5th grade teacher. One of my boys yelled out right before the 3:15 bell rang, "Everybody be quiet, I have a boner!" I was like, did he just say that? The way he said it made me giggle like a schoolgirl. Luckily, no one noticed me turn and bust out laughing. No one else really seemed to notice what he had said. The bell rang to go home and I call him over. I asked him if he knew what that was. Very innocently, he said no. Then I thought, oh great. I could tell by his face that he wasn't lying. So I said, well, it's when your private parts get hard. Right when I said that, he got this very scared look on his face and said, I promise I didn't know that. Like I said, I could tell he wasn't lying. I had a very hard time keeping a straight face. He said his friend had yelled that out once, so he thought he would. I told him he can't say those kinds of things, and he has to be careful what he says. He walked away very embarrassed. I laughed and laughed when he left the room. Kids at that age be saying some crazy things without really knowing what they're talking about. A girl got so drunk that she locked herself in the bathroom. We found her and obviously had to call her parents to come take her home. We kept telling her, listen, it's your dean and you have to unlock the door. She kept responding in the horrible drunk teenager voice, now you listen, I'm your dean. It was very difficult for us to not break down in laughter. Stupid kids. Getting drunk at school doesn't exactly sound like a good time. 2 of my 5th grade students were arguing on our way back to music class, so I went over to see why they were talking in line. I asked what was going on, and the first kid said that the other kid had called him gay. The second kid looked me straight in the eye and said, I didn't call him gay, I called him a B word. I sent them on their way to the principal's office and sarcastically thanked them for the extra paperwork. I worked in a computer-based classroom at one point where the students took many of their classes online. Some of them tried to cheat the system by copying and pasting short phrases into all the fill-in-the-blank or essay responses, hoping it'd glitch and pass them through. Quickly discovered one student had been pasting homo 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 into all his responses, which backfired pretty well in one particular instance. Question: copy the words that apply to you. Answer: homo homo homo. I hope you marked them all incorrect except for that one. First year of high school, I got sent to the principal's office by my near-retirement teacher for breaking dress code with my t-shirt that had drug references and paraphernalia on it. The funny part was when my principal had to explain to my teacher that Billabong is a legitimate clothing company name, and nothing more. In 6th grade, during a school mass, my buddies made up a thing called Wiener Whack Wednesday. Self-explanatory. Go around nut-tapping everyone. Well, our really hot teacher caught 2 kids doing it, and we had a whole lecture our next period. She asked if any of us knew anything about it, and all the girls told the teacher what was up. Every single guy in our class, 15 at the time, small Catholic school, got called to the office. We had to take turns talking to the principal and explaining that none of us were gay. Then she made us call our parents. I was really freaking out that my father would think I was gay. I love how this is going on and that's their concern. Not the fact that y'all are just whipping it out and smacking each other with it, as long as you're not gay. Not a teacher, but saw a kid stand up in Russian class to do a speech on a topic of World War II Russia. He decided to do the whole speech on why Hitler was the greatest. Now, our teacher was born in Russia, grew up during the Soviet Union, and came to Minnesota to teach. She was horrified. If you think that the United States hates Hitler and Nazis the most, you've not studied Russia in World War II. I was glad, because this knucklehead and his douchey friends ruined Russian class for 4 years. I had this obnoxious, smarmy, show-offy 5th grader. One day, he was up to his usual tomfoolery, and a girl silently got up, opened the classroom pencil sharpener, and dumped the shavings all over the kid. I had to send her to the office, but it was a truly satisfying moment for the whole class. Sounds like she was willing to take one for the team there. I was covering another teacher's class in a computer lab, and we have a program called Net Support that basically allows you to spy on the kids' computers. It also serves some legitimate instructional purposes, like allowing you to take control of a kid's computer so you can demonstrate things. Only this teacher never used it, so I don't think the kids knew it existed. I normally don't use it because I don't like the Big Brother vibe it gives off, but there was a kid being a totally obnoxious jerk. He was looking up stupid and distracting videos and laughing loudly about about them and making obnoxious comments to show off in front of his friends. I could have blocked YouTube, but instead I took control of his computer. I started typing in kitten videos into YouTube, My Little Ponies, anything that I could think of that wouldn't be cool for him or his friends. Then, every time he started to freak out and insist to his friends that he wasn't doing it, I gave him back control, and shortly after would take it away again. Then finally, I made a little pop-up come up on his screen that said, "I'm watching you." I expected him to figure out what was going on, but I think he got freaked out instead. It never seemed to occur to him that it was me, so I gave him control back and he did his work quietly for the rest of class. We had this in the engineering building. I was a teacher's assistant and this kid was playing some flash game rather than doing whatever design project he was supposed to be doing. So I would wait until just as he was about to beat a level and ever so slightly screw him up. He didn't know I had this ability, so he was getting crazy frustrated. Seeing him get visibly frustrated, I went over to his desk and said something along the lines of, "I know the program can be hard to learn. Let me see what you've got so far and I'll help." Oh, the shame he had when he turned high screen and didn't even have SolidWorks or whatever open. If I were you, I would have just kept messing with him for the rest of the day. I went to a small Catholic high school in the Seattle area. We had monthly Mass in our gym, and every year around Easter we did the Stations of the Cross. Mass was always brutal, but the stations lasted 2.5 hours or so. Unreal. A little background, I couldn't burp until I was in my early 20s. I have no clue why, but any built-up gas had only one exit. Growing up, I farted to the point that people thought I had a medical condition. People even called me Fart Boy. Anyway, it was my senior year and we were headed to the dreaded Stations of the Cross Mass. My friends and I had let one rip in class a number of times, but never during Mass. We always talked about doing it, but never mustered the courage. I decided about a week before that this would be the day. The Mass was set up where the choir would sing before each station. I think there were 11 or something, and then the priest would ramble on about its significance. Each time the choir stopped, there would be about 10 seconds of complete silence. We're on the 5th station and the choir is finishing when all of a sudden, I unleashed a behemoth right as everything went silent. I was sitting on gym bleachers, which probably amplified the blast perfectly. I remember the guy in front of me inexplicably holding a yellow plastic screwdriver, and he dropped it. In shock or from the blast wave, we'll never know. My buddy and I proceeded to muffle our laughter for at least an hour until Mass ended. I've never tried to not laugh for that long before or since. Each time one of us would start to settle down, the other would release a cackle that started the whole process over again. We didn't even get in trouble. I'm sure the teachers thought it was an accident or never wanted to speak of it again. I'm laughing right now. One of my favorite memories. In high school, I got called into the principal's office. They put a screenshot of the Urban Dictionary entry for Cleveland Steamer in front of me and asked why I was looking at that. I laughed my butt off and said I was just doing some research and got sent back to class. Guys, I'm going to tell you right now, don't Google it. I used to work in a super strict school for kids who got kicked out of their regular schools. We had an assembly twice a day, morning and afternoon, that was extremely serious. Kids had to sit up straight with their hands in their laps, girls on one side and boys on the other, totally silent, that kind of thing. Occasionally, when we were having behavior problems with entire groups, we'd make them sit in assembly for the remainder of that period or however long until they could get it together. There was a class of middle schoolers, naturally, who could not stop farting. They'd intentionally fart as loud as they could to be gross and disruptive, and it even evolved into them getting up out of their seats and farting on each other. This is hilarious to me now, but it got really old and really smelly. Anyway, one day it was happening so much throughout each class that we took them to assembly. I'm standing in front with one of the other teachers, and our principal was talking to them, except he was mad. So he's pacing back and forth, reaming these kids out, punching his fist into his hand, spit flying out of his mouth. His face is bright red. He's saying all this stuff about respect, and then he adds in, "Oh, and if you have to fart?" And he yelled the word fart with such venom and disdain that I just lost it right there in front of everyone. I could not stop laughing. I tried to play it off like a coughing fit or something, but I couldn't. I had to leave the room. Not a teacher, but the last time I was sent to the principal's office was over a live chicken in high school. The high school I went to used the 8-block schedule system. My last period teacher was afraid to the point of hilarity of birds. We had chickens at home, and since they were 4-H chickens, they were quite docile. I put one in a duffel bag one morning and then put it in the top shelf of my locker. They'll just fall asleep if it's dark. So once last period came, I put it in the bag. She was used to us all bringing bags in since it was last period, and when she got up to put the attendance slip on the door, I just took it out of the bag and put it in the middle of the room. Hilarity ensued, and I spent the next day playing Pokemon in suspension in the cafeteria. Is it really suspension if they just let you hang out and play Pokemon? The year was 1987. Second grade me decided to bring the Penthouse mags I found under my dad's bed to school. I found them the night before and thought up this whole plan. It was cold, so I slid them in between the pocket of my jacket before leaving in the morning. Shortly thereafter on the playground, I was showing my buddies all these beautiful women. Finally, get to class and found out my teacher was ill and was replaced by a sub. Thinking I had it made, I slid the mags under all my papers in my box and just went about my day. Just before lunch, the sub started going through boxes, searching for a folder for the neighboring teacher. That's when she screamed. The sub was waving the Penthouse at me while dragging me to the principal's office. To make things that much better, my sweet 80-year-old grandma was the one to pick me up. I made the mistake of leaving a 9th grader in my classroom when he missed the bus home. I had to go to a meeting and it was pouring rain, so I let him stay. I told him not to use the computers. The meeting was in the computer lab. We were learning how to see all of the students' computers on our own screens. The tech guy had us all pull up our first period classes on our monitors to test it out. No student should have been logged onto a computer at the time. All the screens should have been blank. I saw that a very conservative Jehovah's Witness teacher in the row ahead of me had one screen lit up on her multi-screen view. I watched as she clicked on the screen to see it larger. She gasped. She made a small whining sound. It was anime-style adult content. It was the screen of the student I had left alone in my room. The teacher quickly turned around, calling my name very loudly, and asked if the student was in my classroom. I told her he was. I got up and went to the phone at the back of the room. I called my classroom number. The student answered. I said, "You're doing something you shouldn't be right now, aren't you?" He said, yeah. I said, "I suggest you turn it off right now." I heard footsteps running across the floor and a slam. He returned to the phone. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. We'll talk about this later," I said. I hung up. What an unlucky kid. He chose to watch that on the wrong day at the wrong time. I don't know about unlucky. Sounds like he just made a really bad decision. There was a student with autism who lived in a very literal world. We'll call him T. You had to be very precise with your words, as T could not comprehend slang or figurative language. He had an issue with another student at recess the day prior. It was something minor about a basketball. Basically, T had a basketball and placed it under the goal and walked away. Another student grabbed it, T became angry and ultimately gave the ball to the other student rather begrudgingly. Apparently, T told his uncle and the uncle's response was, "I'd have made that kid eat a poop sandwich." Well, T made a quick stop by the litter box before coming to school. He also wrote a note to the other kids saying, "I get the ball today, you can have this poop sandwich." It wasn't a gesture he viewed as inappropriate. He actually thought the poop sandwich was a viable option for the other student. I had to send him to the office, but my God did I laugh. Even his mom laughed before apologizing. The principal still has the note in the office 2 years later. I'm sure the kid receiving the sandwich probably didn't find it as funny. I'm not a teacher, but my mother is. A kid in her class asked if she had any kids. At the time, I was my mother's only child. She mentioned me and the kid goes, "Well, what school does he go to?" And of course, my mom answers without hesitation. The kid goes, "Good, I'm gonna blow it up." Instantly expelled. Yeah, I don't think there's any other course of action to deal with something like that. I didn't even send the kid. I was too amused. I asked one of my students to come smash a giant spider on my desk. Being 9 years old, he walked up with an impressive swagger, trying to show all his friends how brave he was. He took one look at it and whispered, "Oh, F word." I was the only person who heard him, so I just stifled my laughter and told him I wouldn't write him up if he killed it. He did and was the talk of the lounge at lunch. I teach at a university, so I didn't send him to the principal, just out of class. I once told a student to leave class because he never brought his textbook and constantly played on his phone. So after 2 classes of this, I told him to get out because he was distracting other students. This kid freaked out, yelling and cursing at me. Keep in mind, I'm a 5'2" female and this kid's about 6 feet. The rest of the class is like, what the heck? And I stared him down and said, "Get the F out of my classroom!" Kid picked up his books and left. From that point on, anytime someone screwed up in class, the rest of the class would shout, "Get out of my classroom!" at them. They all thought it was hysterical that I cowed this giant. I mean, you gotta let them know who's boss early on.
Why cheat when you can leave the relationship? Because you can't cheat when you're not in a relationship. Duh. Some people get a dopamine hit in their brain from cheating and a sense of comfort and familiarity being in a relationship. They want both. Not proud of it, but I did it once upon a time. Never again. The rush and excitement of a new love is not worth all the guilt you feel, the pain you cause others, and the horrible feeling you get when you realize that you are not a nice person. I recently read a study where they measured the level of regret in women after episodes of high-risk sex. They were looking at hookup culture, but cheating was included. They identified a cycle of hookup, regret, and doing it again. They postulated that the purpose of regret as an emotion was to limit the behavior, and that regret might grow with subsequent episodes. However, what they found was that the level of regret diminished with each subsequent episode, such that after several flings, a woman engaging in high-risk sex has no regret at all. I recognize that hooking up is not exactly the same as cheating, but the study would suggest that once a cheater, always a cheater, is not necessarily true. A person who arrests cheating behavior early might regain mastery over their behavior, i.e., it suggests a marriage can likely be salvaged after an isolated failure, but an ingrained pattern of behavior might be irredeemable. Therefore, the standard advice of kick her to the curb might not be the best option, and a more nuanced assessment would be more appropriate. However, a serial cheater is likely to have a hard time getting control of their compulsion, as their regret diminishes to zero. I'd love to hear opinions from women on this. I would also love to hear women's opinions on this. I asked myself the question when I had a woman who was trying to cheat on her husband with me. I was like, if she's as miserable as she says, why not leave? Had a friend give me this exact explanation and it made a lot of sense. So much security and safety, and they are too lazy to make a change for themselves. I came close to cheating once, and it was because I didn't admit to myself just how unhappy I was in the relationship. I kept telling myself I can make it work. Then I was put in an environment that had several ladies that were happy to talk to me and be around me. That dopamine hit was massive, and I can 100% see how it can just happen. Luckily, I allowed myself to be honest about my feelings and broke up with my ex before I did anything. Do everybody a favor. Always be honest with yourself. That last bit, absolutely words to live by. From my understanding, it's better to have the safety net of the familiar and go do whatever than to end things and risk things not working out. Easier to use someone as a safe space and explore rather than taking the risk alone. I had a jerk of a housemate tell me once it's because it made the breakups easier for him. He'd cheat and make sure his partner found out, and that way they could get all mad at him and never want to speak to him again, and he could just go about his life like nothing happened. There's a certain thrill to sneaking around. Some people get off on the gotta hide whatever feeling they get from cheating. Also, if they leave the relationship, then they lose whatever perks of that relationship. It's hard to survive in the world on a single income. When there are kids and a mortgage involved, it's easier said than done. Not condoning it, but conventional and flawed wisdom often values stability and security over honesty. And sometimes people just get stuck in abusive, one-sided relationships, but their upbringing has taught them to stick through it, no matter how bad it gets. The short answer is that the person cheating is usually and often accurately perceives that they, and often their children and perhaps even their spouse, believe it or not, few cheaters simply don't care about their partner's well-being, would be financially devastated and emotionally traumatized by blowing up their shared household, and since no one cheats with an intent to get caught, this is the way to remedy the missing spark without sacrificing the household stability of everyone else. This is the kind of answer that comes from someone that purely values objects and money and doesn't actually care about anyone else's feelings while simultaneously trying to gaslight someone into believing that they are the least selfish person in the room. Like personally, I abhor betrayal and treachery of any kind. I'm not religious and I only know this because I watched the frickin' Dante's Inferno video game movie with all the different styles and everything, but there is a reason why treachery is the 9th circle of hell. My marriage ended with infidelity. In my experience, it didn't happen all at once. It was a gradual thing. One year we were a little distant, then the distance grew cold, and then we were like two cubicle workers making our life run. But along the way there were exciting milestones that made me think that we were succeeding, that we were happy. A graduate degree, the purchase of a little home together, the decision to try for a baby, the joy a year later when we finally succeeded, new jobs, the birth of our kid, moving to a new city. And there was heartbreak, the death of his father, my battle with postpartum depression, a job loss, illness in the family, my parents divorcing after 40 years of marriage. It was easy to point to those things as the reason we felt so apart. We weren't ready to admit that there was something broken between us too. So I assume when his co-worker was a sparkly new friend and they found themselves working late at the office more and more frequently over time, I'm sure their pull toward one another just grew. But here's the thing, my first marriage was over before he cheated. The question was, as Esther Perel puts it, was whether I would spend my second marriage with the same person. His new partner made it an easy answer for both of us. I don't blame the cheating for my divorce though. It was just a symptom of something already wrong. For me, his affair gave me clarity about the fact that we hadn't been happy for a long time. It's been 7 years since we split, and our daughter is incredible. We co-parent beautifully together. He married his co-worker, they have a 2-year-old together, and she's a great stepmother to my kid. My career has taken off and I'm remarrying later this year. I am so grateful he asked for the separation and for the person I became after my divorce. Cheating isn't always this black and white thing people make it out to be. Time heals all wounds. I know this person clearly had a lot of time to reflect and contextualize how things ended the way they did, and I'm glad that everyone seems to have walked away from the situation to better lives. Still don't condone cheating of any kind though. Cheating is a suck-butt thing to do, and I'm not defending it, but many married people are financially bound together but unhappy. It's the wrong thing to do, but it may go some way toward explaining it in many circumstances. Because people don't cheat because they want a new relationship, they cheat because they want the excitement of a casual relationship and the comfort of a long-term relationship at the same time. If I'm trying to put myself in a cheater's shoes, then the 3 reasons I would assume are 1. Lust. This form of cheating is physical and not much thought put into it. 2. Happiness. This is when someone feels trapped, marriage, kids, history, and just wants a moment to escape and relies on the affair partner to make them happy. 3. Safety net. Cheaters think about it this way. Why would you leave a job without having another job lined up already? It ensures that they won't go through a period of feeling undesired. From my understanding, the reason for cheating and staying in a relationship can be a myriad of reasons. Some people have such low self-esteem that the minute they get any attention from someone else they consider attractive, they have a hard time shutting them down. Others have a very separate idea of a stable love from a committed relationship and attraction from a fling. In these scenarios, the perpetrator still loves their partner, but they fall victim to their personal issues and betray their partner's trust. Others, however, are more narcissistic and view their staying in a relationship despite cheating as a favor to their partner. Others still may come from very traditional backgrounds and feel they can't leave their relationships despite no longer loving them. All of this doesn't even account if there are children in the picture too. Do people really not get this? People don't want to be single or in a new relationship. They want all the perks of their existing relationship plus the thrill of something new. They aren't trying to be fair or considerate or reasonable. They want everything they already have plus more, and they think they'll get away with it so no one will get hurt. Yeah, I pretty much completely agree with everything this person says, but this is already a downer topic, so I'm not going to get too deep into some of this stuff. Emotional immaturity and codependency. It's easier to let go of someone when someone else desires you. Basically, they want out and they've made up their mind about it. You may have no clue yet. They're not interested in working through issues. They're done. So to make things easier for themselves, they cheat. This way, they're getting the attention their low self-esteem needs from outside the relationship and no longer have to regard your feelings. They expect you to be upset when you find out. In fact, that feeds their low self-esteem even more. Your anger, confusion, and disappointment makes it more likely you'll say or do something in retaliation. Any such action on your part makes it easier for them to justify in their own mind that they were right in choosing to leave you. To them, things ended a long time ago, so they don't really see it as cheating. They use cognitive dissonance to cope with how they feel about themselves. Pointing this out to them doesn't help them, and especially doesn't help you. In fact, the bigger of a deal you make it, the more you'll be gaslit. Don't expect fairness or accountability from this person. If it goes public, you're likely screwed, as people who are capable of convincing themselves they're in the right in this kind of situation have no problem making things up in order to preserve their public image. The best thing to do once you become aware of it is nothing. Anything you do in terms of confrontation will only make things worse. Instead, quietly get your affairs in order until you're in the financial position to cut and run. The person you thought you knew is gone. Think of them like an alien who took over your former partner's body. Lament in private. Cover your butt while you're exposed. Leave on your timeline. Never look back or engage. They are now dead to you. Ultimately, people will respect you more for your maturity, and you'll give the ex no grounds to come after you. In fact, they may even implode, but that doesn't matter. How they feel doesn't matter anymore. Winning is getting away cleanly. Because one, divorce is expensive, like really expensive, and most people can't afford rent and mortgage on one salary these days, plus long-term financial plans will be seriously derailed. 2, change is scary for everyone. Clearly the marriage that now sucks was once a great idea, now it's not, but it was a big deal not to be taken lightly. New relationships are extra exciting, and someone who is married has seen the extra exciting relationship turn into something not great. The new thing has no guarantee, and cheating gives the best of both worlds. 3, maybe there are kids involved. Staying together for the kids is an awful idea, but 7 seconds of getting your noodle wet trumps disappointing your kids for life, unless you get caught. 4, people suck. Everyone has done something they shouldn't have and there is a rush to it. Maybe it was a little white lie. Maybe it was something criminal. Either way, it was the easy way out and you were delighted you didn't get caught. The first time it was difficult but rewarding. The next time was less difficult but still rewarding. Eventually, it's just rewarding. Monkey branching, too afraid to jump without having something to hold on to. People stuck in emotionally abusive relationships often cheat as an escape. Simply breaking up is much easier said than done due to the amount of psychological control that's usually involved. Because you have to keep the main person around in case the side piece doesn't work out. You have attachment issues. You're financially tied to a person. There are many reasons. None of them are good reasons, but people who cheat don't care. Don't mind me, I'm just thinking about King of the Hill and Nancy Hicks Gribble cheating on Dale Gribble with John Redcorn. There's the bit where they're doing the duck boats and Nancy's all like, no wonder I need 2 men in my life. One of them keeps letting me down. Because you don't want to leave the relationship, you just want to have sex with other people. As a retired serial cheater in my teens and early 20s, this is an honest answer. Some people are legit skeezy. Others are genuinely in love with their partner but also have other asexual needs and don't know how to square that circle. I'm definitely against cheating, but I think it's important to challenge the idea that cheaters are all evil, weak, foolish, etc. Cheating is quite common, even among people who maintain otherwise healthy relationships. I think the cultural fantasy we have that 2 people can always fully provide for each other's needs and that true love conquers all is really quite childish, a fairy tale. Certainly it is not 100% impossible for 2 people to be able to meet most of each other's needs. It can happen, but it's incredibly far from universal. I don't think that everyone should be polyamorous, but I do think that many people really need to be and should, and that some people need to be but don't have any of the skills necessary to manage polyamorous relationships. I've never cheated, by the way. Psychotherapist Esther Perel has a lot of really intelligent and useful stuff to say about this topic. She's helped a lot of relationships come back from that place of broken trust. And she is much better than me at explaining why cheating doesn't necessarily mean that the cheater is a bad person or doesn't love their partner, and at explaining why our current cultural views of romance and relationships really set a lot of us up for failure. Which is not to say that all cheaters are loving, good people. They are certainly much more likely to not be than the average. My point is more that it's not a universal thing, and we should be looking more deeply into this. So I briefly looked into who this Esther Perel person was because I was interested. And in the brief time I've been looking this person up, I probably can't exactly make that many assumptions about who they are or anything or what their theory is exactly, but I don't particularly like what I'm hearing from them in their talks and whatnot. Maybe it's just my principles getting in the way of me being enlightened by these groundbreaking ideas, and I say that with quotation marks. It all sounds very intelligent in that they've mastered the oratory arts, they're just a very good speaker, they have chosen the perfect words to get their argument across and everything, but at the same time there is just a lack of morality, it seems, and even awareness that cheating, infidelity in itself, is just inherently cruel to do to an individual who isn't aware or casually and callously abusing the relationship and whatnot. God damn, just open up a frickin' dialogue. Also, if you're interested in this author's ideas, go check them out yourself because I'm not slandering them. I'm more just wondering how this person became, and I quote, a national authority on modern relationships? I love my partner and would die for her, but I haven't been asexually attracted for a very long time. I get through sex with her because of the love, but I don't look at her and see someone that I find attractive. I wish I did, and I'm mad at myself for not, but I can't help it. Breaking up has a lot of consequences that people don't want to deal with. If they live with their partner, they'll probably have to move out, which is a headache and expensive. They might depend on their partner financially and can't afford to break up, or they aren't willing to give up their current lifestyle/income. It will be really hard on the kids if they have any, and so they don't want to break up the family. They might lose joint friends and other relationships that they have together, because they will usually side with one or the other. Most divorces are incredibly expensive and taxing for both parties. You could be going in and out of court for months or even years. If you're worried about that last thing, then that's why you should get a prenup. A prenup is a prenuptial agreement that basically says your finances and properties and whatever will be divvied up in this way, and you can both agree that in case of a divorce, no one gets anything. And it's a very good way of sussing out what the person you are marrying's real intentions are and what they value before you get married. What if there is a woman in an abusive relationship with someone she is afraid to leave? If she tells him it's over, he will blow up. If she just sneaks out and leaves and lives on her own, he might find her and still get to her. She has been with this abusive guy so long, she doesn't think she can leave. He tells her how terrible she is, how worthless she is, and that she should be happy that he puts up with her. She might not have an income or money of her own. Some people take care of all the money and only give a bit to their partner when they ask. Let's say this woman meets another man. She meets him at work, she meets him through mutual friends, maybe an old flame looks her up. He is kind to her, and she starts to feel like she might matter a bit, like maybe she isn't so awful, but she can't just move in with this other guy. So they start a relationship. She is finding a way to escape and a way to rebuild herself. When she has the self-esteem to leave, she also has a way to maybe get some financial and emotional support and protection. Believe it or not, I would honestly say that if you're with an abusive person, then yeah, feel free to cheat on them. If they hit you, if they smack you around, make you feel like crap every day, legitimately abuse you, then yeah, you can do whatever the hell you want. If it means you can somehow get out of that relationship, except kill them, because where does that leave you? My mom tried to leave my dad for years. He was an extremely angry person who was physically, emotionally, spiritually, financially abusive. It was bad. Cops were involved a lot during my childhood from domestic disputes. They never did anything. He wouldn't let her leave. She tried. It always ended up with her and my siblings and I being hurt by him. He's got 2 kids me or my siblings have never met from affairs. He told my mom it was her fault. One day, she met someone and they fell in love, and she eventually told him about it. It was a really scary time, but he kicked her out for it. I know that was the happiest day of her life because she finally got away. It's been about 10 years. She's still with that person she met, and I've never thought for 1 second my mom was wrong for cheating. There are a few things more hurtful than cheating. Just be honest and say you want out. That's better for everyone. Also, preserves the would-be cheater's honor. Money. The old saying, it's cheaper to keep him/her. No-fault divorce is being outlawed in a few states. It's hard to believe, but it's turning into a thing. Well, it's better to be a poor man's joy than a rich man's toy. Oh, take it from me. You ought to see. Upon that love, there's only misery. And it's better to be a man's whole world than a sometimes girl. Ruby Winter's better, for those of you wondering, and I know most of y'all are just here for the Reddit stories and all that, but come on, I'm trying to give you dinner and a show here most of the time. I think people who cheat have tunnel vision and lack of foresight and insight. A friend of mine is a serial cheater. He's always in some sort of relationship that he completely dive bombs into without any thought, and it ends in chaos every time. I think he does it because he enjoys the thrill of it, and also he's terrified to be single. Possibly mental illness plays a part in this. He is financially ruined from his last divorce because of his cheating, but moved in with his new girl within a month. It's so exhausting to watch from the outside. Cheating can be a misguided attempt to address unhappiness within a relationship. Some individuals may struggle with the emotional difficulty of ending a partnership, fearing confrontation, loneliness, or the upheaval of their lives. Instead, they may seek temporary solace or validation through infidelity. However, cheating undermines trust, hurts both parties involved, and can cause long-term damage. While leaving a relationship requires courage and honesty, it provides an opportunity for personal growth, finding a more compatible partner, and fostering healthier connections in the future. I think most of the time cheating is an emotional thing, not a logical thing. I once knew someone who was in a dying relationship. The relationship was going nowhere and she was losing interest in her boyfriend. The right thing to do would be break up with her boyfriend. Instead, she cheated on him and then she almost immediately confessed to him and begged for forgiveness. At a glance, this would look like a passionate mistake and then instant remorse. But in my time knowing her, she always hated taking responsibility or being blamed for things. I have seen her seriously hurt people, including me, to avoid taking blame or responsibility. I think she subconsciously thought that if she broke up with her boyfriend, he'd be angry and he'd blame her. So she couldn't break up with him. She doesn't want that kind of responsibility. But if instead of breaking up with him, she cheated on him, then he would break up with her. Her cheating makes the breakup A, his responsibility, and B, inevitable. So she can't chicken out of it anymore. Note that this plan does not make 100% sense. It's worse to be blamed for cheating than for breaking up. But when she doesn't want to be blamed for something, she really will hurt people, so they will do things that she doesn't want to take responsibility for. Anyways, her plan backfired. Her boyfriend decided to forgive her and give her another chance. A few days later, she broke up with him. It just sounds really vindictive to me at a certain point. Like, God damn, you're toying with people's emotions here. And by the way, I'm not down for cheating in either way. If anyone's got the impression that I'm like, yeah, boys, or anything like that, no, I just think cheating of any kind with anyone just hurts people, and it sucks so goddamn badly. This one just made me sad to read through. Then again, quite a few of these have made me sad lately. I need a happier topic.
Teachers of Reddit, what's the most shocking or surprising thing you've seen going on in your classrooms? A kid stuck a craft pipe cleaner in an electrical socket. Cue a flash, a yelp, and blue fuzz everywhere. Socket and cover were both burned black and didn't get replaced for 3 years. The student was an 8th grader. I knew a kid who put a paperclip in an electrical socket and thought wrapping it in paper would protect him from the shock. In grade 10, the idiot had to go to the hospital because it screwed up his heartbeat. No matter what age you are, I think you should know you don't mess with electrical sockets. Back when I was in school, we had 3 of the 6 ambulance teams in the whole county called out to the school because one sunny day, someone passed the fad around that kids should hyperventilate and have someone push on their chests until they passed out. If I remember correctly, some 14 students had to be checked out and 1 taken to the hospital. I was a long-term sub for an art teacher that taught in the cafeteria. She warned me about a kinder kiddo named Romeo that had many issues, and told me to basically never turn my back on the class while he was in it. I didn't really pay too much attention to it because I was a genius substitute. But anywho, I turned around to grab something from the art cart and I heard a gasp from the other 22 kiddos. I turned around and he was standing on the lunch table with his pants down, shirt pulled up and yelling, "Who wants to kiss it? My name's Romeo!" I was mortified. I'd hate to know where the kid learned that behavior. My dad is a teacher, and this is his favorite story. As a PhD student, he was teaching American history at a small high school. As he was lecturing, he noticed an odd smell, and an enormous football player walking toward him from the back of the class. The football player hands my dad a note which says, "I have just pooped myself." Not a word is said. My dad simply nods to the student, and the student walks quietly out of the room to handle the matter. My dad kept the note for around 20 years, and would occasionally ponder the grammar of pooping oneself instead of just pooping oneself without the extra poop. There was a strange craze of crapping in books and leaving them in the library. Somehow, nobody was ever caught. One time when we were watching a movie in class, I saw the girl next to me touching herself. Let's just say my 16-year-old body full of hormones had good material for the next 6 months. What movie were you watching? One day, our teacher didn't show up to class, and neither did her substitute. Some kid gave a 50-minute lecture on pimpology during that time. Sounds like the kid saw an opportunity and took it. I went to a small music school where basically everyone smoked all day. One day during midterm review, our audio professor yelled at the whole class for being under the influence for about 20 minutes. Nobody knew what to do. A very large, peculiar boy by the name of Thomas was caught pleasuring himself by sticking his stuff into the pages of books and thrusting. Might I mention typical Tom, as he was referred to, was a junior in high school. Surely you have better ways of taking care of that. A student pooped in the attic and threw it all over the walls during a break, then played it off as if it wasn't him and invited people to see. He's still in school. Not from my time as a teacher, but still relevant. Way back when I was a youth, there was a guy in science class. Let's call him Dan. Now, Dan was one of those kids who, for one reason or another, failed at all challenges involving common sense. He also liked to crush up chalk and snort it during science class. About the only thing Dan was good for was soccer. He played in the school team and was regarded as our best striker. Anyway, Dan's stupidity came to a head one day during an experiment set up by one of our chemistry teachers. She had a large container of chlorine gas she'd procured prior to the lesson at the front of the class. She explained what she was going to do, what the gas was, and ended her explanation with a stern, "Do not breathe this in." Then she got distracted by something and had to leave the room for a moment. She was gone no more than a second when Dan stood, dashed to the front of the class, opened the container, and took a long, deep, hearty snort of chlorine gas. The airborne ambulance made remarkably good time getting to the school, and somehow saved Dan's life. But it was a while before he came back to school, and he was a changed kid. He couldn't play football anymore. His lungs were permanently damaged, and even running short distances left him gasping for air. Not sure what became of Dan, but he taught me a valuable lesson about chlorine gas. Apparently it was used as a weapon during World War I. I can see why. I hate to say it, but this is Darwinism at its finest. In my classroom, we kept a television screen which can be connected to wirelessly. One day I was setting up a DVD about World War II, and it came up in the top right, Billy's iPhone connected. It then proceeded to play the infamous Paris Hilton tape. The kid was utterly shocked and later admitted it was a mistake. He was watching it in the back of the room and somehow connected it to the TV. Oh, poor Billy. I'm a high school teacher in American Samoa, a US territory. Tattooing is a huge cultural thing. A student I know, P, comes to me before school and asks if he can hang out in my room at lunch. Sure thing, I tell him. It's pretty common for kids to grab their lunch and hang out in a teacher's room. Come lunchtime, L comes to my room and asks if P has shown up. They're supposed to meet in my room at lunch. He hasn't shown up, so she sits and waits for him. Soon after, P comes in carrying his backpack and lunch. I'm sitting at my desk eating my lunch. Suddenly, I hear a zzz sound. As soon as I heard the sound, I recognize it. I turn my head. L is sitting at a desk with one of her sleeves rolled all the way up. P is holding a tattoo gun in his hand a mere inch away from L's arm. "What are you two doing?" "P does tattoos, miss. He's gonna do something for me on my arm." "You can't get a tat in my classroom, L. P, put away your equipment. You can't give a tat in my room or at school for that matter." Tattooing being a cultural thing or not, I feel like that's a pretty brave move. I can't claim credit for this story, but it's a goodie that allegedly happened in my buddy's 4th or 5th grade class. So this 4th grader, that will henceforth be known as Conrad, apparently went on a family trip to China and came back with a pencil decorated with intricate dragon design that he absolutely adored. Like during class, he would take it out of his pencil bag and put it on his desk just to look at and admire, but never used or even sharpened it. One day, when Conrad left the room to use the bathroom or something, the kid sitting on his right, who we'll call Jim, picked up the dragon pencil, stuck it in a pencil sharpener, and ground that beautiful work of art until it was just an eraser with a stub, with a tiny amount of dragon design still visible. When Conrad comes back into the room, he seats himself and looks forward, noticing what's become of his most prized possession, but doesn't say a word. He then grabs the sharpened pencil that he'd been using to write, screams, and stabs it through the hand of the kid sitting to his left, Bill, incorrectly assuming he was the culprit. Needless to say, Conrad didn't come back to class the next day, or ever again. Not sure what's good with Bill's hand. Eesh, Bill was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. I'll be honest, I was rooting for Conrad though. I taught choir for several years to 7th and 8th graders. I've seen some stuff, man. One day I'm assisting another music teacher in a very big school, and things are going pretty smooth. I see this one kid looking kind of gray. Then he sways a bit and starts turning green. I know where this color-changing act is headed, so I signal for the kid to head to the trash can. He made it to the can, but then threw up so violently that he sprayed it all over the walls and the double doors. I thought the sweet little sopranos that sat in that part of the room were either going to puke themselves or pass out. I had a hard time not laughing at them. So I send the kid to the nurse and go look for a custodian. I can't find one anywhere, so I have the secretary page one. Nobody shows up. I go looking again and find the head guy, old retired sailor, hiding in the kitchen doing something so he wouldn't have to clean up the puke. I tell him it's an emergency. The room was about 80 degrees as the HVAC was crap, and head to the room to help out with crowd control. Did I mention there were about 80 kids in the room? The custodian finally shows up and starts to mop the puke up and wipe down the walls. I walk over near him and say something like, "He really made a mess, huh?" The old salty dog replies in full voice, "Gosh darn effing kids making messes all over the gosh darn place. I hate this effing place." The sweet little sopranos were horrified. I had to walk away so I didn't lose it. Poor guy sounds like he's having a really bad day. I'm not a teacher, but my ex-girlfriend was. She had just started teaching kindergarten, and these two kids had a full-blown relationship. They would hold hands, kiss, and get angry when other kids started hollering at their partner. Weirded me the heck out when she told me. Kids start early these days. I was kind of a crazy kid in middle school, so I had this one friend. Let's call him Eric. The both of us were inseparable. Well, one day during study hall, we were both goofing off and had to be separated, so they put Eric in the quiet room. At the time, I thought it would be a neat idea to crawl through this air vent type thingy that was in the wall at knee level, which led into the quiet room right by Eric's feet. I quietly knocked out the other end and grabbed Eric by the feet, which made him scream. This, of course, got the attention of the teacher, who quickly ran over and grabbed my legs trying to pull me out of the air vent. Well, I didn't want to go peacefully, so I kept holding on to Eric's feet while the teacher kept pulling on my legs. It turned into a tug of war between my teacher and I, which I eventually won by crawling through the other end into the quiet room. I'm surprised I turned out normal. Hey, we all mess around when we're kids. Not a teacher, but one of the only memories I have from grade 1 was us sitting on the floor in the morning semicircle while our teacher went on about school stuff. There were about 3 rows to the semicircle with me sitting on the outside corner on a chair, so I could see everyone sitting down quite easily. We had this weird kid that just wasn't right. He'd belt out the national anthem as loud and off-key as possible every morning, even with everyone looking at him and not singing. So naturally, he decides that this semicircle is the perfect moment to whip it out and spit all over it. Then he spits on his fingers and starts Somehow I'm the only kid that sees it, not even the kids beside him. I sat there stunned for like 30 seconds wondering if anyone else was witnessing this, and why no one's doing anything, before the teacher noticed and snapped her fingers at him. He got the message. Props to her for not making a scene though. Kids are messed up. Not a teacher, but 2 kids would grope each other during class. The teacher never said anything, but it was pretty obvious, so she had to have noticed. The teacher probably just wanted to pretend it wasn't happening. My sister is a teacher. A girl had been disappearing for about 30 minutes a day in her homeroom period. After some investigation, it turns out the girl had been scheduling and giving blowies during that time. She didn't even make money off the deal either. She just gave them out of the goodness of her heart. In middle school, they had a detention in the study hall room, but the detention kids were put into separate rooms in the back with a tiny little window. There was a kid that pleasured himself in there, and the study hall teacher went in there and saw the kids' aftermath all over the wall. She yelled and told all of us to go into the hall. His phone was still out with adult content pulled up on it. The kid ended up being homeschooled after the incident, and I've only ever seen him once since graduation. A lot of the stories I'm hearing here seem to involve young kids needing to learn when to control themselves. This didn't actually happen on school property, but it was pretty shocking nonetheless. 2 boys were assigned to be partners for a project in school. For the sake of clarity, let's call one boy John and the other boy Fappy. They were working on the project together at John's parents' home. While there, unbeknownst to John, Fappy stole a key to the house. It seems that Fappy was into some kinky, albeit tame by today's standards, stuff, and so it was quite surprising to John's family when Fappy was found wearing John's mom's underwear and touching himself in John's parents' bed. Now, I'm not one to actually believe that a story such that one hears in the schoolyard is necessarily true. However, it just so happens that my parents were friends with John's parents. After hearing the story at school, I asked my mom about it, and she confirmed it. Surprising to no one, the story caught on like wildfire, and Fappy's reputation for being a cross-dressing, self-touching criminal preceded him for the remainder of his time at that high school. That's That's not really the shocking part, though. What actually surprised me about the whole incident was how insensitive the teachers, particularly the gym teachers, were to Fappy. They were just as ruthless as the students with their name-calling and such. I would go so far as to even say that they incited much of the abuse toward him, and even encouraged the other students to ostracize him. As a teacher, you'd think you'd want to bring up that incident regarding that kid as little as possible. It's really just cruel to keep it going. One day, I was walking into class when I heard kids yelling and screaming like maniacs. Turns out it was a smoke bomb brought from Mexico that left the room smoky and smelling like urine. We got our backpacks searched, but nothing was found. The kid then confessed after the backpack search, so he and the one who gave it to him left with an officer. I haven't seen them since. The classic stink bomb. I remember one of those going off in high school. My school tried to do an experiment and tried to put all the male below average grade students and delinquents into one English class taught by a female teacher. It did not go well for her. When she stepped out to use the bathroom, we emptied all the bookshelf and her desk and threw them out the window. Kids hid behind the blinds of the windows and slept. One kid missed his bus sleeping through the next 2 other periods. We made dominoes out of the books. She actually joined us for this one. Another time when she stepped out, we stood books up and threw knives and scissors at them to see if they would stick. Learned how to throw knives that day. We were on a second floor that partially looked out onto the roof of the first floor. Kids would often just leave and enter through the windows. Not sure why. Our school hall pass was just a red laminate that had hall pass crudely written on it. We broke open a locked drawer to find a lamination machine and made everyone hall passes. But the weirdest of all, we all passed and actually did fairly well in her class. I actually took a copy of The Day No Pigs Would Die home because I liked it so much. Sounds like you had a good teacher for not only hanging in there, but actually managing to capture your attention along the way. I went to an all-boys secondary school and was 15 at the time this happened. Our class of 25 boys were coming back on a field trip in a packed minivan doing around 60 miles per hour on the motorway. The guy in the back right seat decides to announce that he's going to start pleasuring himself, and then stands up and goes through with it. There were 25 male adolescents on that bus. They weren't as shocked as the old couple in the next lane. Oh, that poor old couple. I'll never forget the look on that old woman's face as she peered into a school bus of children and proceeds to get an eye full of wang. The boy was expelled, rightfully so. In grade 4, my friends and I decided to protest in our class during lunch period because the school replaced the chip machine with healthy snacks. At first, it was no big deal. 5 or 6 of us just beginning to chant at our lunch monitor. But by lunch recess, it exploded into a full-force riot protest. We had hundreds of kids across 3 campuses in a colossal hive. It was one of my proudest moments, but it quickly turned into a nightmare when the teachers fought back. They tried to hurdle us up and gave an insane amount of detentions. I was one of the lucky few to escape before the genocide, but I still think to this day about those I lost that fateful day. Eventually, the school caved and offered semi-healthy snacks like Crispers and pretzels. I hope later generations appreciate the sacrifice we made, and I pray they live a more peaceful time than we did. I think our poster's blown this up into some grand battle in his head, but in actuality, most of these kids probably just wanted a reason to get out of class. We had a half-hour session with our mixed ability home class to start the day at my school, then all split up to go to lessons by ability streams for the rest of the day. I was in top groups for most things, but in this first hour, I generally ended up at the back of the room with the slower kids, and we started playing cards or poker dice. Never for money, though. After this had been going on for a few weeks, I was caught in a quiet corner by the teacher, and thought I'd get in trouble for leading them on. Instead, she just said how it was really good for them to concentrate for that length of time on something, especially something requiring maths and patterns, but that if any of the other staff came in, to hide it all quickly. It's always nice when you think you're going to get in trouble and you just get a general thumbs up from the teacher. Not a teacher, but also a student. At the age of 12 to 13, we had math class with a temporary teacher. Let's call the teacher A. In our class, we had the typical students who did stupid things without thinking. Let's call them B1 and B2. Out of nowhere, while everyone solved their math problems and A was walking around helping the students, B1 and B2 threw their pens and accidentally dropped it to different locations. That way, they could roam free in the classroom. When they went to pick up their pens, they'd also whip out their junk, doing the helicopter and rubbing their junk on different furniture. It became almost like a game for them. The one who got caught first lost. How's that fun for you? It's just weird and you're creeping out everybody around you. Not me, but my parents are both teachers. My dad teaches drama and directs a school play each year. I can remember on the first night of one of these shows a few years back, he came back and said that whilst he was checking backstage during one of the set changes, he found a kid peeing into a bottle because he forgot to go to the toilet before his part. It was really funny but shocking because this is a really posh school. Hey, I don't care who you are, everybody's gotta pee. We had our study hall sign-in in the same room that kids would serve in-school suspensions. Well, one day I walked into a kid pleasuring himself and finishing all over the floor. He then zipped up his pants and walked out to a very stunned professor. Come on, guys, control yourselves! I'm not a teacher, but this happened to my friend. We were sitting in the back of the classroom, and being freshmen in the South, some of us picked up dipping tobacco. Not me though. So my friend decided he's gonna put a dip in class while the teacher was giving a lesson. If that wasn't dumb enough, a while later the teacher's done with the lesson and we're all just chit-chatting. But I notice he's sitting in his seat to himself. Moments later, he starts gagging and coughing. But no one really paid attention. We were pretty loud. I go up to him and check on him, and he said he threw up the dip. It was in the back corner of the classroom, so it wasn't noticeable. I glance over his desk to see there's tobacco-ridden puke with red juice all over it. I ask him what the heck that was. Apparently he didn't want to be caught with the dip, so he tried to make it seem like he threw up the juice instead. However, when he noticed that wasn't going to work either, he just left it. After I processed how stupid he was, the bell rang and we all left. Throw up still on the floor. I mean, in your situation, I guess you guys just call that one a win, right? Mechanics of Reddit, what vehicles will you absolutely not buy or drive due to what you've seen at work? Never buy a car the first year they redesign or remodel it. Always run into issues that they fix the second or third year they release it. This is probably good advice for more than just vehicles. Do not buy Ford Fiesta or Focus automatics from 2012 to 2016. Their power steering is messed up. Their transmission is messed up. Both had a class action lawsuit out. Not a mechanic and not in the US. Currently living in Mexico. Graveyards in Mexico are filled with people dead from car crashes in the Nissan Suru. A complete piece of crap with wheels that has 0 stars in safety. Parts are cheap and gas mileage is good, but they're just coffins with wheels. Just this year, Nissan Mexico is going to cease its production. 3 years after the Latin NCAP made the security tests and scored 0 in everything. Even with all these facts, it's the most bought and stolen car in Mexico. Gen 1 Porsche Cayenne. They're getting cheap enough for most people to afford, but the cost of maintenance is ridiculous. That goes with any premium manufacturer. You always got to keep the maintenance cost in mind. You might get something dirt cheap with a really nice badge and name on it, but it's going to cost you a lot to fix it up come time. 2012 to 2016 Ford Focus. The clutches go constantly, to the point where they made it a service bulletin, and it continues to happen after the warranty is up. Yeesh, we're only this far in and we've gotten 2 red flags on the Ford Focus. That's not a good sign. When I was looking to buy a used car, I found a Land Rover for $2,000. My father, who was a mechanic, said to me, yeah, it'd look great on the back of a tow truck. My dad's a mechanic and he always says Volkswagen New Beetles. My first car was a Volkswagen New Beetle. Needed a new radiator? Guess the whole front end is coming off, again. I had to work on one of those, but the problem I had with it was that it was the largest feeling car I'd ever driven. Yes, it's a tiny thing and I knew the front bumper was only like 3 feet in front of me, but it felt like the car's a mile long. I worked for a major Japanese auto designer you're all familiar with. We used to do an event where we took a vehicle apart piece by piece, every single piece, inspecting, weighing, measuring, and comparing them to our parts. We did this for every design model and with every competitor. Never once was any Chrysler vehicle mentioned, not even in comparison documents. It was the ultimate disrespect. They weren't even considered a competitor, not even for some portion of their vehicles. I saw a lot of different cars broken down and close up. I have a lot of good things to say about competitors, but Chrysler Dodge Jeep is not one of them. You go. Although it's push to start, just make sure to keep your back straight when pushing as to not injure yourself. Well, that's not the greatest vote of confidence, is it? Subarus are great cars, except for the Tribeca. At work, we call them turds. I don't know if I've ever even heard of the Tribeca. Chrysler Sebring, specifically the V6. Alright, that's a couple warnings for Chrysler owners now. We're keeping tallies here. Any new model automatic Focus. The manual transmission are fine, but the automatics are the most trash pieces of crap. We've had multiple come in with less than 5k miles with transmission leaks. I've not driven one that doesn't shudder when you accelerate from a stop. My god, the Focus is getting destroyed out there. I just bought a used Suzuki Swift for cheap, only to find that Suzuki has pulled it out of North America entirely. We've already had issues with it, so this is gonna go great. Always look into that kind of thing before buying a car. You need to know you're gonna be able to reliably get it fixed. My mechanic tells me never to touch an out-of-warranty BMW. He owns two, and says the electronic gremlins have driven him insane, and are virtually unfixable by a non-dealer mechanic, requiring things like circuit board replacements, proprietary software readers, and things like that. That's why my friend keeps his 1995 BMW. It's one of the last ones you can work on yourself. Of course, that means at this stage in its life he's working on it a lot, and there's not much he can do about the body rusting. Mercedes-Benz are gonna put my kid through college. Every part is artificially inflated, and I have a theory that every job takes some messed up specialty tool just so you have to be at the dealer or a German shop. Also, any Cadillac with the North Star V8. Just heck no. Also Dodge. New ones are garbage, and old ones will run for 400k, but the body is gonna rust off the frame by 100. The Reliant Robin. Never trust a car with 3 wheels. Never! If you guys haven't seen the Top Gear clip of this car, seriously, go check that out after you're done with this video. The Reliant Robin. I have a love-hate relationship with my old Land Rover Discovery 1. More than capable, but stupid crap broke. What made me get rid of it? The freaking door handles. Couldn't get dealer replacements and used ones were going for over $300 a set. Made me say screw it, and I junked it. Alright, that's Land Rovers coming in a couple times now. The Pontiac Sunfire. I own 2, and you have to take the front wheel off to do an oil change. Worst design choice ever. When I lived in Japan, I had a van that required me to remove the ashtray to check the oil. I thought it was a joke when I was reading the instructions, but nope. Other than that, ran like a champ. It was a Mazda Bongo Friendly Turbo Diesel. That's a pretty cool name for a van. Can we get stuff like that in North America? I've come across a few wrecks involving smart cars. The best thing I can say about them is that they aren't hard for the fire department to pry open to get the body out. I had to drive a smart car for a tech job in Michigan. One of the clients was being lazy and the owner asked me to drop off a laptop on the way back to the office, so I ended up in a different lane than I would normally be in. I stopped at a busy intersection and I look into my rearview mirror and notice a car is coming up pretty quickly, 40 miles per hour. No way he saw the light. Older guy, not sure if he was distracted or not. He slams directly into me. Strangely, I wasn't scared so much as angry when I realized what was about to happen. He slams into my back and I figure it's probably the end of me. I get pushed into the guy in front of me and I can feel an ache, but I walk out pretty much unscathed. The back of the car looked impeccable. The front that got pushed into the other car was smashed to heck. No airbag or anything. Thanks, seatbelt. It started leaking fluids and the car itself was totaled, but I got out okay. Still debating if that was lucky or not, but a question for different subreddits. The most concerning part about that is that the airbag didn't deploy. Isn't that like the one thing that's supposed to happen? Smart cars do look like they would crumple pretty easily though. A lot of comments say Dodge. What is it about Dodge? Is it all Dodge vehicles? I thought their trucks were supposed to be pretty reliable. I have a Dodge Neon and it runs like a piece of crap, but there seems to be little that anyone can actually do to kill it, and it's really cheap to fix. Yeah, but they're really cheap to fix for a reason. They're built really cheap. That's why it runs like crap. My immediate family all drive Honda. We're all good friends with the owner of a local dealership. We've all had multiple models hit 200k plus without issues. I've had my Accord for 11 years and have about 210 miles on it. And last week was my most expensive repair. Replace the battery lead cables. $200 said and done. We've driven Pilots, Accords, Odysseys, Civics, not an issue. I'll never buy a car that isn't a Honda or Acura. Opposite end of the spectrum, a lot of Japanese makes are very reliable. Honda is always a top contender because they tend to be very affordable, and as our original poster pointed out, repairs are typically pretty cheap as well. I own a frame and suspension shop. My answer, Dodge. Alright, Chrysler Dodge Jeep is getting crushed out there. To be fair, Jeeps haven't been called out in particular yet, but they are all the same manufacturer. Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon. They may look nice, some people think so, but they're uncomfortable as heck to drive in, extremely expensive to fix and upkeep, and tend to break fairly often. Not a mechanic, but from my experience, screw any Taurus made around the year 2000. They'll run forever, but you don't want them to. The windshields leak and the insulation under the carpet is made out of some recycled fiber that smells disgusting when it gets wet. Son of a Mazda mechanic here. If you live in the north or anywhere it gets remotely cold, do not buy an RX-8. It won't work 3 to 4 months out of the year and will need constant, expensive care in the other months. Any US Navy submarine. Talk about overpriced. And parts? Good luck. We don't have any money. Oh, it's a nuclear part? Never mind about us being broke. Here's $400 for that 2-inch O-ring. May as well order 12 of them while you're at it. Source: nuclear mechanic in the US Navy. You know, the thread is open to vehicles, so this qualifies. Dodge Grand Caravan, 60,000 miles on it, and I've replaced the rear brakes 5 times, and it already has a misfire. Mark another one for Dodge. First and foremost, no Chrysler products, ever. No Chrysler, no Jeep, no Dodge. They're trash vehicles made by a trash company out of trash parts. The diesel engines in the trucks are the only thing worth a damn, and they don't make them. The old Jeep Inline 6 was great too, but everything they put it in would fall apart around it. I know most people reading this aren't in the market for one, but Land Rovers are hot garbage. Expect screwy electrical issues that have your mechanic chasing his tail for the life of the vehicle. Anything German is going to be too expensive to fix, with the exception being Volkswagen. And even if they can rack up the miles on the odometer, you'll have tons of stupid problems from cheap manufacturing. Alright, someone start digging the grave for Chrysler. Ran a bumper-to-bumper, all makes and models shop in Las Vegas on the edge of Summerlin, our rich area. To start, I'd like to specifically point out the Isuzu Rodeo. I won't even work on one. I turn them away at the door. Haven't found one without more repairs than it's worth. BMWs can be a monster. They're just super expensive for parts and not always as well engineered as you'd be led to believe. Mercedes, Mitsubishi, and Audi also have expensive parts. Dodge, as has been said, has really dropped the ball for the last few decades. I drive a 70s in decent shape. When it comes to GM and Ford cars, their upper tier is alright, but the mid and lower tiers are junk. Buy a Nissan or Toyota, please. Even a Honda. GM and Ford are truck dealers, and they know it. Lastly, I can specifically point out the GM Cadillac Northstar engine, found in 90s and 2000s models. It puts Dodge to shame. Leaks from every seal, and the starter motor, an otherwise common part, is located in the valley of the engine, literally the center of the motor, under the lower intake manifold. I think the book time is like 6 or 8 hours. Most starters are close to 1 hour labor. The 90s models even have a liquid-cooled alternator. You know, like the new age liquid-cooled PCs. Let's run our water into our electrics. Except car engines get much hotter, vibrate non-stop, and are expected to go further than your PC. Lot of insight from that user. Again though, a lot of repeat names too. Claims adjuster here. I've seen more than a handful of Hondas, Civics, and Accords hit a deer full speed and still be able to drive them to a safe location. Solid. I love how in a thread where we're supposed to be talking crap about crappy cars, we're actually hearing some upvotes for Honda. My mechanic told me never to buy a Volkswagen, so I bought an Audi. The turbo failed at 100k. For those of you who aren't aware, Volkswagen owns Audi. Everyone laughed when I bought my Kia, but I don't see it listed here. Knock on wood. Kia got their crap together in the middle of 2006. There's actually a 2006 model of the Kia Optima and then a much better 2006.5 model. From that model onward, they've been decent cars. The running joke about old Kia was they were so cheap you could buy two, one to drive and one to take parts from. A cheap Escort or a brown Probe. We're still talking about cars, right? Franchise garage technician / state vehicle inspector here. Eddie Cadillac with the Northstar V8 engine. It has a feature that shuts cylinders off at low load to save fuel, but makes a lot of noise when active, for miles per gallon gain that aren't really impressive today. Something like 20-25 city highway. It's also notorious for leaking oil. It's been engineered to be able to run for up to 50 miles with no oil, because designing an oilless engine is easier than fixing all the leaks in a Northstar. I've never seen one not leaking out of somewhere. Next, about German luxury. They're not inherently bad cars, but maintenance is more expensive than most folk expect. So people buy used thinking they're a steal secondhand, and then a year later they've got no-name Chinese tires, squeaky brakes, and 5 warnings lit up on the dash because their 2002 Taurus only took 2 $30 oil changes every year. Why would this be different? Honestly though, I think the drivers put me off more than anything. Caddy and especially Nissan just attract a certain kind of person. That car is either spotless and new or the grossest pit of human goo you'll ever sit in. Crumbs in between everywhere, dank smelling ashtrays in the cup holders, all the surfaces are sticky, and weird dark spots in the cloth seats where a person would normally go. Nasty stuff. We've had a few references to this specific engine from Cadillac now. There may be some of you that want to look into that. Of course, if you have one, you might already be aware. How about medics of Reddit? Because Volvo, yes. Ford Explorers, no. Dodge Neons, also no. Honda, also yes. I'm also kind of amazed that more people don't shoulder tap their firefighter, medic, or emergency room doctor friends for car purchasing advice. I was in a really bad accident while I was driving a Honda Accord. The car didn't make it, but the police and firefighters were pretty surprised that I did. Honda for the win. Guys, if we're learning anything from this thread, it's buy a Honda. Motorcycles are my thing. I wouldn't touch a Ducati or any modern BMW. Build quality is abysmal. On another note, all cars will crumble to dust before my old 2002 Yaris does. Japanese import. Without a doubt, the best little crap box of a car on the face of the earth. When the apocalypse comes, the cockroaches will be all that's left alive and they'll be driving that 2002 Yaris. I'm imagining a Mad Max future where everyone drives around in a Yaris. Used car salesman here, so I'll list in order from worst. Number 1, any Rover. You know it's bad when an extended warranty costs $15K. 2, most Audis over $50K. 3, anything Chrysler. 4, Ford economy cars. These being Escapes, Fiestas, and Fusions. Motors are usually okay, but electrical can be hit or miss. Every car is different, so don't take my word for it. Just get a warranty if you can. Number 5, Nissan Leafs. I could keep going, but yeah. I want to say that's the first Nissan we've seen, but maybe not. Anyhow, another hit on Chrysler and cheap Fords and Rovers. Eesh. Don't buy a 2013 Jetta. It has general mechanical issues, and if you crash it, it's screwed. Trust me. After owning a Jeep, never own a Jeep. At least not as your primary car, and have plenty of funds to fix it. Something I've picked up on over the years if you want to buy a car. I'm sure some will disagree, but it's just a general guideline. 1974 and earlier, buy American. Ford 200 inline 6 will outlast us all and decent mileage to boot. 1975 to 1995, buy German. More rigorous maintenance but built to last forever. 1995 plus, Japanese. Cheap, reliable, no frills cars. 2010 plus, Japanese and Korean. Top of the food chain at the moment. More advice recommending to buy Asian. I don't know guys, not looking like a whole lot of other options out there. My Hummer H3 is the worst car on the planet. Since hitting $110K, I've had to do a $700 to $900 repair every 2 months or so. The car is paid off, but with these repairs, I might as well be having a car payment. Dude, look up recalls and get them fixed. My boss's H3 went up in flames and burned to the ground because there was a recall he didn't know about. Fire started under the glove box. This could just be punishment for owning a Hummer. Mechanic here. To be fair and honest, there isn't a single brand or model to pinpoint. It's all about how you take care of it. I've seen $200,000 cars that I wouldn't take a leak on to put out a fire, and I've seen $2,000 vehicles that are apocalypse proof. Some of my friends and coworkers spend so much money on repairing their cars or buying new ones, just to neglect them and get to the same, oh, it's a piece of crap mentality. Meanwhile, my derelict in appearance 18-year-old truck, I've been the owner for the last 8, soldiers on with just basic service and a few fixes and upgrades here and there. That is an important factor at the end of the day. A lot of it comes down to the owner. You have to take care of your car. Glad to see my Chevrolet Silverado surviving this thread just fine. Dodge trucks, not so much. Maybe you haven't been paying attention, but at the same time, a lot of the comments we've had have said that the trucks are better, so at least you have that going for you. This may be an unpopular opinion, but I'll say V6 Hondas and Acuras with 5-speed automatics. The transmission is fine in 4-cylinder cars, but apparently has a fluid passage design flaw that can become further restricted with debris, causing overheating and failure of one or more clutch packs. The issue seems to manifest itself due to the extra torque in V6 applications. I believe it only affects models years 2002 to 2006. There's a reason that the 03 Accord Coupe V6 is a third the price of a similar 4-cylinder model. The V6 might be on its second or third transmission. First mark against Honda and Acuras here, but to be fair, we're talking about 20-year-old cars here, so I don't think we need to worry about that too much. Everyone throws out a turd now and then.
Children, what is something you found out about your parents that you never told them about? When I was around 10, my father came storming into my room and stiff-armed me into the wall. He screamed in my face through tear-filled, angry eyes. "What did you do to it?" I had no idea what he was talking about. He dragged me into the bathroom and pointed at a box of Arm & Hammer used to deodorize the bathroom. Still screaming, his hand squeezing the back of my neck so hard I thought he was going to snap my neck. I still pled ignorance. No clue what he was talking about. He threw me in my room and barricaded the door with a large dresser so I couldn't get out, even though it was a pull. He left me in there for 3 days. No food, nothing. I was terrified. He never explained why he did what he did or what he was talking about. Found out later when my much older cousin confessed at a family Christmas party that she had broken into our home and stole my dad and stepmom's booger sugar stash that they hid in the Arm & Hammer. She said this like it was a funny family story. So my dad locked me up during a bender and almost killed me in the process. I'm now a dad and don't speak to my parents at all. Screw them. Found out the reason we were so poor growing up was because both my parents had a drinking and booger sugar issue. We always had a house, food, health insurance, and clothes. But a few years without Christmas and birthdays happened. We almost lost the house once. My parents were pretty high functioning for addicts to keep us. Oh well. I didn't know my dad had a wife before my mother until I was 18. I know that my mother is a convicted felon. Not my parents, but still my family. I also know my grandfather had an illegitimate child with my aunt. I put 2 and 2 together. My aunt is my mother's sister. My uncle is her son, but my mother's brother. And my cousin is my aunt's child. My uncle's siblings and my mother's niece. It was later confirmed by the other side of the family. My mother doesn't know that I know. But how did you find out your mother was a convicted criminal? Was it like a Wikipedia search? Did you Google then, eh? I always thought my father had a very small appetite. He'd eat a few bites of a meal and declare he was full. When I hosted my first big Thanksgiving in my house with my fiancé, my father put away 3 pounds of potatoes, a whole pie, and more than half the turkey by himself. My mother remarked how he'd had a bottomless stomach since they were kids. I was telling my fiancé later that night how oddly the remark struck me considering his track record. My fiancé explained to me my father wasn't eating so there'd be enough to go around for me, my sister, and mother. I know their bank and budget details. My parents were raised never to talk about money. It was considered improper, which is not great when it comes to learning budgets, etc. Google saved my wallet. When I was real young, we didn't have much of it, and I'm sure that influences that attitude too. My father was forced to retire. Job qualifications were changed on him. More school versus early retirement after working for this one job his entire life. Mom had a government-funded job that got cut this year. I was worried about their finances. I wasn't planning on helping helping them out for at least another decade, and I've been anxious about them. Accidentally overheard them debating some stuff while visiting for Christmas. His 401k is okay, and it turns out he did get his pension. It's just reduced. Going to keep an eye on their needs, but I think they're going to be okay, minus any emergencies. My mother was bad touched as a kid by my grandfather. For the most part, she's normal, but she has some emotional issues and bouts of depression. My grandfather died before I was born. My grandmother and mother never talk about him, and I've never seen a picture of him. Honestly, I don't even know his name. My aunts told me one day when I asked why nobody talks about him when I was older. I think that's a pretty damn good reason to never bring someone up in conversation or even tell future generations in the family that person's name. They'd be dead to me too. In like an emotional way on top of the already literal way, I mean. My dad would always tell my little brother and I about this Russian girlfriend he had when he was younger. What he very conveniently left out, however, is that they got married so that she could have citizenship. Thank you, Ancestry.com. He still has no idea that I know anything about it. The circumstances of my parents' divorce. I was 10 when they separated, and they never really told us why. Just that their marriage wasn't working anymore. I didn't really care, so I didn't ask, but over the next few years I would eavesdrop on bits and pieces of conversations they had and eventually put the pieces together. Basically, my mom cheated on my dad with my now stepdad. My mom and now stepdad worked at the same high school, and my mom had taught each of his kids. When my dad became suspicious, he put a keylogger in the family computer in her phone and found some suspicious texts, emails, searches, etc. He hired a PI who followed my mom to the airport one day and struck up a conversation with her. My mom took the bait and ended up confessing everything to the PI under the impression it was some random stranger. I was introduced to my now stepdad a little under a year after they separated, but didn't meet any of his children or family until a few years later. Turns out he was having an affair as well, but was introduced to me by my brothers while he was still with his wife. I don't think any of my parents know that I know this, and it's not something I would ever bring up with them. I love all my parents and step-parents the same, and although they all did some crappy things, they all seem much happier now than they were when they were married to one another. When I was around 10 to 11, I went through a really rough patch emotionally. The substances I was getting for my ADHD started messing with me really bad, and that combined with regular prepubescent angst turned me into quite the little butthole. I started getting into a lot of fights in school and was generally an emotional wreck. I'd get so mad I couldn't express it and would instead just be a douche to everyone around me. One night I was on the couch with my eyes closed, basically being quiet for the first time in months. And I heard my mom say to my brother that raising me was just really hard and that sometimes she wished I was just someone else's problem. I know she was just tired and frustrated, but I've never forgotten that, and I've also never confronted her about it. My mom was cheating on my dad. That's a huge reason why they split. She very quickly remarried and popped out my brother. It wasn't until I was an adult that I did the math and realized she was pregnant by her second husband and still married to my father. My parents started going through a messy divorce when I was in middle school. It was a big mix of things which ended it. According to my dad, my mom was a secret alcoholic and would often pick my brother and I up from school while drunk. When my dad found out, we would randomly get picked up by a friend's parents and they would watch us while my dad made my mom sober up. My dad likes to exaggerate, so I have no idea how much she drank, or if she was just having a couple drinks with lunch. Either way, my mom doesn't know that I know she picked us up from school drunk. She's definitely not an alcoholic now. She keeps the booze front and center in the house now, and it always goes down at a reasonable rate. For my dad, when the divorce was final, he completely shut down. He became a recluse and wouldn't talk to anyone outside of work. He felt like he lost all of his friends in the divorce, but I could tell something else was bothering him. He never really recovered from the divorce and still only interacts with me, my brother, and his siblings. The divorce was finalized about 8 years ago. I was talking with my uncle, my dad's youngest brother, who roomed with him in college. Saying how worried I was about Dad being lonely as he approaches 60, my uncle told me to never tell him I know. But apparently my dad was engaged to another woman when he was in college. They had been engaged for 6 months when my dad contracted gonorrhea from his fiancée. Turns out she had been cheating on him for years with the rest of the football team. I guess he never recovered from that, because it explains a lot of his controlling behavior and his distrust of anyone but a blood relative. I always want to tell him I know and that it's okay for him to talk to me about what happened, but I also don't want to betray my uncle's trust and ruin one of my dad's last good relationships. He recently found out his sister and mother were keeping a small secret from him and threatened to never speak to them again. He has a lot of trust issues and abhors being lied to. I found out my dad had been cheating on my mother for most of their marriage with a large number of different women over the years by following Wireshark tutorials on hack forums as a teenager. We're a middle-class suburban family and I have 3 siblings. My dad does all the work and my mom is a stay-at-home mom without a lot of payable skills. Telling my mom would ruin her and the family. They would either divorce or my mom would stay quiet to keep the quality of life for her children. Either one has no positives for me, my mother, or my siblings. My youngest brother is graduating high school soon and the rest of us have moved out. I have a very large amount of evidence compiled and I'm planning on anonymously giving it to her in a few months. I can't lie, I don't envy this man, the situation he's in or the decisions that he is making. I would not want anything to do with this. I mean, good luck with that. My aunt and uncle stopped talking to my parents when I was about 10 years old up until I was 18 and I reconnected with my cousin, their son. It hurt my parents that my mom's brother and his wife stopped talking to them for, as far as my parents were concerned, no reason. When me and my cousin became friends, our parents started talking again. Once I was talking to my cousin about it and he told me that his parents stopped talking to mine because my parents didn't buy big enough presents for my cousins, even though they were well off and my parents at the time were pretty broke. I've hated them ever since, though. I would never tell my parents this, as it would hurt their feelings, but F you, Steve, and F you, Lorraine, for being a pair of materialistic little douches. Also, Lorraine, my cousin told me that he walked in on you doing it with another guy, so you're also a cheating harlot. Have a nice life, buttholes. I went through the DirecTV history on my parents' TV. I wanted to find the name of a show my father kept telling me he loved so I could buy him DVD copies. Instead, I found a bunch of GGW PPVs. My father, the man who taught me how to illegally download media, buys his smut through pay-per-view on his cable provider. I was so embarrassed I could never bring myself to tell him. I'm terrified he might have to commit the Irish Catholic version of seppuku. My dad thinks my mom is insane. He regrets his entire relationship they had since they were teenagers. That's not it, though. My dad is even more messed up than my mom. He has serious emotional issues. Being in prison tamed him in the sense that he doesn't feel in the position to act on his impulses, but he has them still. I see it. My mom and dad had an abuser-victim codependent relationship made in hell. She says she stayed for the kids, but the whole reason why she had us in the first place is because she was trying to chain a man to look after her. She is incapable of taking care of herself to this day. My dad thinks I'm exactly like her. He also won't say that. He really doesn't like me and I used to be scared he would do something to me, but he won't do anything now because 1, he's old and needs someone to take care of him. He knows his wife would leave him in a heartbeat. Contrary to my mom, she doesn't actually need him. 2, I am diagnosed mentally ill and as far as he's concerned, I am totally crippled, which pretty much guarantees that I'll either stay by his side until he dies or will run to the first douche that can financially support me. They don't know that I know why they did all of that. It's pretty sad. They are both so afraid of being old and alone. We were apparently much better off than I knew when I was a kid. I never thought we were poor because we didn't go without the basics, but I was constantly told we couldn't afford things my mom just didn't want to spend the money on, so I was in the hand-me-downs from church members until high school. Wasn't allowed extracurriculars that had added costs, so no sports or Girl Scouts, that sort of thing. When I started working in high school at 14, my parents stopped paying for pretty much everything except my health and car insurance. I bought my own food, clothes, phone, etc. Never mind that my younger brother got to do anything he wanted and mom still pays for his car payments. Definitely not the end of the world, but it gave me a weird complex and I still have troubles budgeting and rationalizing extra purchases. Maybe some parents in the world are just fine with being really open about who their favorite kid is in extreme ways. Or maybe your mom woke up on the wrong side of the bed the day you were born and they've just been internalizing that anger for your entire existence. I ain't got a clue, but you certainly have my sympathies. When I was 15, I was broke and looking around the house for spare change. I was home alone at the time. I looked in my parents' room and found a metal box with a padlock on it. My curiosity got the best of me and I looked around for the key. I found it and unlocked the box. There were letters and a journal inside, written by my mom. They were what she wrote in for therapy. It turns out my mother had 3 miscarriages before having me. I have an older brother and we're 7 years apart. I don't think he knows yet. I don't want to tell him, really. The letters made me cry my eyes out. I'm a mama's boy. All 3 of the miscarriages were going to be girls. She wanted a daughter named Mary Catherine. After she had me, she had to have surgery and was infertile afterwards. I always felt sorry for my mother since then. If I get married and have a daughter, I think I'm gonna name her Mary Catherine. I don't like being accusatory, but what were you going to do if that lockbox had money in it? I wanted to record a video for YouTube. I was covering songs and wanted to do a bit of a higher quality video this time. I knew my dad had a cool old camcorder somewhere, so I decided to poke around to find it. I find it under my parents' bed and think sarcastically, what if they had an SX tape on here, LOL. My parents are not the type, I thought, to do something like that. And it seems so, movie cliche. So my dumb butt rewinds the video and I'm confronted with my mother's woo-ha taking up the whole screen. Mentally scarred, I close the camcorder and shuffle back downstairs, trying my best to forget that horrendous mistake. They've got no idea I saw that. My dad was drunk once and told me my mom was boring in bed. This was a couple years after they divorced due to him finding another woman. Still, gee, thanks, Dad. I didn't need to know. My dad left his emails open one day, and with me being a snoopy 9-year-old, I had a look. Turns out when he visited his home country, he had an affair with his ex-girlfriend and was now having asexual conversations with her. I never told my mother, but 3 days later I was notified that they were getting a divorce. I know my mother is scamming money from a pension she should no longer be getting. She also took hundreds of pounds worth me and my brother were entitled to until we were 18. Both moved out at 17. And to top it off, she then took mine, not my brother's, only mine, bank fund my father put away for me before he died. They have a lovely car and home and excess money, and when I asked them for help, they never did. My brother asked and he got to move back home and got invited round for dinners. I know I was treated differently because I had a daughter and my stepdad hates kids. I found out my dad was a paranoid schizophrenic one night when I overheard my grandma praying for him. She thought I was asleep. I was like 16, but genuinely thought that his behavior was the most normal thing in the world since I had grown up with it. I cried myself to sleep that night. I did some research on it not long after since I didn't know too much about schizophrenia and was so traumatized when I realized how messed up he was. I don't know if it was by chance or because I started noticing things, but he became unbearably worse after, and me and him started fighting really badly. My mom finally told him to leave the house and they had a really messy divorce. I still feel guilty about fighting with him to this day and wonder if things would be better if I had never found out. He lives alone now and isn't allowed contact with any of us. It wasn't originally like that. My siblings used to go and visit him and he started electrocuting them so nobody could hear their thoughts. I feel so guilty when I think of him, living alone without any family around him. I've never told anyone that I found out through my grandma, but my mom still has never spoken to me about it. Now that I look back on things, I'm 24 now, I realize that she was being emotionally abused by him. It was just so normal to us, we never even realized. I know my mom used to do booger sugar and may have been to rehab. It's super weird because she and my dad became hardcore evangelicals before I was born and my mom has never alluded to her previous lifestyle. It's kind of annoying because throughout my teen years, she acted like my curiosity about everything was just wrong and she didn't understand why I would think to involve myself in it. She always acted better than me, and I know she would be really mad if she knew that I knew. Some people are just really weird and can't accept or let other people know that they at some point have made mistakes in their life. A laptop that was handed down from my dad to me and then to my sister had some disturbing court documents buried real deep about my real mom on it. It was regarding the custody battle and there were numerous accounts of our mom trying to cause physical harm on us. We were too young to remember any of it, but one of them was about how my mom drove our Bronco into a lake with my sister in it. She wasn't even 2 at the time. I always wondered where that car went. Both my sister and I have just never said anything because we know how hard it was and how long it took for our dad to get custody, and the amount of crap he went through we'll probably never understand. My dad wasn't a virgin when he married my mom, even though she thinks he was. I also know he's cheated on her twice, at least. All of my siblings know as well, but none of us have told her. She's completely against divorce because of her religion, so it wouldn't make her leave. She'd just be miserable. Well, more miserable than she already is with him. Got a whole lot of infidelity going on here in this topic, and on the ones that I haven't read, a lot of hardcore you-don't-want-to-know fetishes. I'm the eldest, but only because of something that had happened to the one before me. My old aunt called me his name before correcting herself and telling me a bit. When she realized I actually didn't know, she shut up and wouldn't say another word. All I know is that my entire family knows, but they refuse to tell me anything. And they tell me to drop it because it was some traumatic event that my parents don't ever want to talk about. My dad apparently gave my uncle on my mum's side a black eye just for mentioning it, and Dad's pretty calm and cool-headed. I'm 19, my brother is 17, he doesn't know, and this will be a mystery until the day they die and I can dig out the information from someone else. I found love letters from my dad to my mum. I read 1 or 2 sentences. The one that sticks with me is he said he wanted to pour champagne all over her body. Then thought, holy crap, this is personal and gross, and put them back. The sad thing is they frickin' hate each other now. My father passed before I was born. Just yesterday, a buddy was telling me he was able to go back 6 generations using the Find a Grave website to find out his ancestors' names. I thought cool, as I've never met my father's father and didn't know he was still alive. I share his name. I find my father's page, but unfortunately there's no link for parents like my friend's relatives had. Bummer. I do notice, though, that there are several posts to his memorial page, so I go there. Apparently, my mom goes there at least monthly, sometimes more often, and posts how much she misses him and how she wishes he were still alive, etc. She has been with my stepfather, who for all purposes is my father, for many, many years. She lives in a different state and can rarely get to his actual grave. I never felt so sad for my mom as I did yesterday afternoon, but I'll never bring it up. I did call her, though, to chit-chat and gossip a bit, though. Check on your relatives regularly. Unless you've got beef with them, of course, in which case you do you. Not my parents, but my friend's parents. A long time ago, he had a few of us over for late-night games and pizza. My buddy Mike asked me to come into his parents' bedroom, which I thought was weird, but I'm 12, so who cares? He pulls open the bottom drawer of a large dresser, and he takes out what I thought was an elephant mask. Turns out it's an electronic elephant head with a thong attached, and there's a little crevice in the elephant's trunk where you can put your you-know-what, and when the mask is turned on, the trunk moves up and down as it makes elephant noises. Not that it really bothered me, but I never looked at his dad the same again. A huge part of why I left home was because of a call I heard from my mom. When I was in high school, my mom would pick me up after school from one of 2 places that sounded similar and started with the same letter. One day I went to the wrong place to be picked up, my grandmother's apartment, instead of a shopping center. My grandma, who always loved causing fights in our family, took a call from my mom on speakerphone with me in the next room, where my mom called me a devil child, a worthless B-word, and said she never should have tried to get me back from child services after I was taken away because of her abuse. I knew she thought that about me, but it really helped me realize that all her talk about keeping fights in the nuclear family was so she could misrepresent my abuse to the extended family. I also realized that my mom must have done this fairly regularly if my grandma knew to have her on speakerphone instead of taking the call on a phone as normal. It pretty much solidified that my mom had no positive feelings for me and was only keeping me around to further abuse and manipulate. My dad lied to my family for 25 years about having fought in Vietnam. My whole life, he and my mother insisted that he had endured horrific traumas as a young man. However, after they got divorced, my mother mentioned this to his sister. His sister insisted that he had never been in combat and that he had spent his military career in Hawaii. She went so far as to have my father's ex-wife, who knew him at the time, call my mom and confirm that during that time, he was in Hawaii. Other bits and pieces began to make sense, and it became clear that he had lied to my mother about his experience in order to manipulate her. I've never told him that I know this because I'm worried he will lash out or maybe self-delete himself or something. At the end of the day, though, it is kind of a relief to know that he was never in any harm. Parents who dislike, hate, or resent your children. What happened? My son told his friends that I was abusing and bad-touching him because he wanted the attention. We were very close. Child services were called and then the police. He stuck to his story. I don't hate him. I never could. Sometimes I'm very angry, but mostly the betrayal gets me. I would never have believed he would do that. After several awful months, I think it's going to be all right legally, but the legal fees and stress has been overwhelming. Things will never be the same between us. He is a teenager, by the way. I remarried a wonderful man, my soulmate, about 2 years ago. I have 2 kids of my own, one son and one daughter. One is 14 and the other is 21. He has a daughter. She is almost 8. We met when his daughter was about 3.5. It's bad to say, but personality-wise, she hasn't changed very much for the last 4 years or so. I don't necessarily dislike my stepdaughter all the time. I have just had to distance myself a bit. She has no manners, no respect, she's spoiled and will whine until she gets her way. For example, I overheard her tell her great-grandmother to shut up. I also heard her tell her mom, "You are the most disgusting person I've ever met." When they scold her, she always tries to say she was just joking, and then she will start to cry and saying nobody wants me around and stuff like that. I know this is turning into a long post and I apologize. It just has been building up so long. I try my best with her and I had such high hopes for a close relationship with my stepdaughter, but I have found that our personalities clash, and I am used to having respectful kids. My husband tries his best to make her act right, but every time she goes back to her mom's or her grandparents, it gets worse. They give her everything she wants, no matter what, and they allow her to talk to them anyway because she's still little and they may not have any more kids and grandkids. So I don't blame my husband. I feel bad for him because he's tired of having to be the bad guy all the time. Oh, and she likes to torment my cats. I tell her all the time to be nice to them, pet them gently, or better yet, leave them alone. But she likes to chase them, pour water on them, throw dirt at them, etc. She has plenty of toys in her room and also electronics and games, but she will cry and whine until my husband lets her use his laptop. She likes to watch toy commercials on YouTube and tell us what she wants for Christmas or her birthday. She makes these 5-page long lists of what she wants all the time. And then, if she doesn't get it, she whines that she never gets anything she wants. Her mother told us she picked out a $50 Halloween costume last week. She said that she told her that was way too expensive to pay when she is only going to wear it a few hours. Well, stepdaughter proceeds to cry and say she doesn't have anything and never gets anything and she needs new parents. One more thing that makes me mad. If adults are in the room trying to have a conversation, she will interrupt repeatedly until they stop talking and listen to her or watch her do some little something that could have waited. This child gets more attention than any of the other children, so I know it's not lack of attention that causes it. One more thing I thought of. About a year ago, I had my little granddaughter over at our house. She was about 9 months old at the time. Stepdaughter got caught trying to give the baby rocks. Well, we all got on her and tell her how dangerous it is to give the baby rocks. Babies can choke and get injured or even die. All that. Well, a few minutes later, I catch her putting the rocks in my grandbaby's pocket and I go mental. After telling her she could choke and die if she gets hold of a rock, she is putting them in the baby's pocket. Just one more example that there is something not right with this girl. When my wife was pregnant with our first and only child, we knew before birth that she was at high risk of Down syndrome because the gene was quite prevalent in both of our family histories. We both got tested and the doctor told us that our daughter had over 80% chance that she will be born with Down syndrome. Our marriage up to this point was happy and wonderful. We dated for 9 months before getting married and were more of partners than a couple. Everything we did, we decided together. We bought our own business, which didn't cause any fights, but rather we thrived because she was good at what I wasn't and vice versa. I was a messy kid before I met her and she helped me change my ways. She lacked hobbies before I met her and I helped her finding things she truly loved doing. We were happy. Very, very happy. The doctor told us that abortion was a viable option, but we needed to decide within a week or it would be too late. I knew right away that I was for the abortion, but didn't know how to bring it up. When we finally did sit down and talk, I brought all sorts of articles and books on kids with Down syndrome. I tried to show her rather than convince her of how hard our life would be if our child actually did have it. It was going to be hard for both of us to have a healthy child, let alone one that needed far more care. We were both busy and happy. She didn't want to take that option, and there was nothing I could really do to change her mind without really making her mad and ruining our relationship. So reluctantly, I went with it. As luck would have it, our daughter was born with translocation Down syndrome. Only 1% of all cases of Down syndrome are that, and it has a lot to do with hereditary conditions. I don't want to go into how bad our life became. I really can't even handle typing it out. My wife had to quit her job, which she adored. We had to move to a smaller house after a year and a half because of the medical bills. When I came home from work, she was too tired to talk or even see me and went to bed, and my entire entire 5 hours of free time every single day we spent caring for our daughter in some form or another. I didn't see my friends for 9 months, missed my cousin's wedding because we couldn't even think about traveling. Everything changed, and everything changed for the worst. My wife and I only talked when we fought. Either she was too tired and that caused her anger, or I worked too much and didn't help her enough. To tell you my life went to absolute crap is an understatement, because I can't even imagine how much extra stress my wife must have endured in those first couple of years. I don't hate my daughter, but I do resent the fact that we had her, even though I knew our life would be this way. I go to the park sometimes and sit and watch all the happy fathers play with their kids, watch them throw balls around or just run around the jungle gym. That's the life I wanted, that I dreamed of, but I will never have. My wife and I are still together because neither wants to burden the other by leaving. I ain't even going to take a side on this one. I think if you're going to have a child, you need to have absolute open honesty about your feelings of what's going to happen and all that stuff, but I'm not really going to touch this one too much. Not my child, but my husband's youngest son from his first marriage. I don't hate him. I care very much for him, but he is impossible to like. He's 12 and completely incapable of entertaining himself in any way. If he isn't pacified with television or some other electronic device, he's wandering the house being as loud and obnoxious as possible because bad attention is still attention. If you give him attention or try to find an activity to do together, he'll simply try to use that as a bargaining chip to get something else he wants later. He will do anything to play video games, and if you allow it, he will play all day without getting dressed or eating. He will also pretend to be sick to stay at home from school to play video games. He has a time limit but will lie and sneak to try and play longer. Taking away these things does no good. He'll continue to be an obnoxious, annoying little poo until he can play again. Sometimes I let him play so he will stop bothering everyone in the house. He's a chronic bedwetter, so he frequently smells like urine. He's got issues with pooing his pants sometimes too, and swears that he has no idea when or how it happens. He's been to numerous doctors and counselors who tell us to give him fiber. He's been instructed to change out the dirty clothes and put them in the wash, but he won't admit to it. Instead, he soils his pants. He'll often hide them somewhere until his disgusting cache is discovered and he gets in trouble. His punishment is usually a video game ban, but his behavior never changes. I love my husband more than anything, and his other kids and my kids are no issue at all, just the okay youngest. I feel like a monster. Oh yeah, some kids just do not have any mind for cleanliness or anything. God, hiding your soiled underwear and stuff like that in a cache, that sounds just ugh. This may be my deepest, darkest secret ever, and even now it almost brings me to tears to type this. One of my children with mental illnesses has been self-deletion adjacent and has survived numerous attempts. There have been times where I have had to sit in a chair in her room and watch her all night while she sleeps. Everything is locked up in our house. I keep cleaning supplies in my desk at work and bring them home only to clean and then take them back. Everything is a battle with her. It's embarrassing all the time we have an ambulance or cops come over. There is so much more that goes on. Anyway, I can remember one really, really awful period in our lives about a year ago where I honestly felt like she had not survived her attempt and that life for me and her siblings would be easier. There are a lot of days where I feel like I resent her inside. I just tell myself and try and remember that she is still the sweet girl I remember from her being a kid. What I resent is the person she is on meds and the depressed, self-harming person she is when not on meds. I don't dislike or hate my son, but I damn sure have some resentments every now and then. I have a 5-year-old with extreme behavioral and anger issues. They stem from a large dose of steroids required for a long period of time for a previous medical issue. I am not in the dark about these issues. I have a psychiatrist and counselor that we pay for him. However, no one is willing to do anything because he is 5. No diagnosis, barely medication. I have had to inpatient hospitalize my 5-year-old son twice. I have another child younger than him that was born around the same time that all of this started happening, and I just watched the difference between the two. I sometimes wish I had switched and had her first because the only reason I was trying again was so I could have a girl. I watch happy, functional families, and it makes me angry because we have been burdened by this. We can't travel, we can't go to parks or things of that nature because he targets other children, and I don't want to be that butthole mom on on the playground that just lets my son beat the crap out of other kids. CPS is now involved for the 4th time in 2 years because at school he cracked a kid across the head with a rock because the school refuses to give him an IEP because he is so young. My husband and I have tried every parenting book, behavioral therapy method, strategy, etc. Nothing seems to work. Some days I just turn my phone on silent because I know it's going to be the school calling me saying he won't sit still in class and keeps running out of the classroom acting like a butt. But I have asked them repeatedly for an IEP and they refuse. Don't get me wrong, I love my son more than life itself, but it frickin' kills me to watch him have to live like this. He is so angry all the time and sometimes I have to hold him in a full Nelson on the floor crying so that he won't hurt himself or anyone else. I wish other parents knew what this torture was like, the constant self-doubt and wondering where we went wrong. It is slowly killing my marriage and I honestly wouldn't blame my husband if he did leave. In fact, I'd probably send our daughter with him just to make sure she was safe. So yes, I completely understand where some of these other parents in this thread are, and I don't judge anyone anymore when they say their kids have pushed them to the edge. I've been there and back so many times, I have the route memorized. Maybe it's hypocritical of me, but I've got ADHD, a thing that a lot of people for a long time would probably still think, oh, it's just a way to hand-wave bad behavior and all that. But something that I think is genuinely just an excuse to hand-wave bad behavior is ODD, which is oppositional defiance disorder. I think that is a absolute crock. I made an account just for this question. I beyond resent my son. He's 7. He lies all the time. He never listens and does harmful things to others. His father took off before he was born. The states say they can't find him without an SSI or address for me to receive support. I've been living off the state for over 6 years. I work and go to uni full time. Every day is an argument and fight with this child. There are no fun times. There are no happy moments. He makes me miserable. All I want to do is graduate with my bachelor's in engineering. Every morning he makes me late for class because he refuses to listen to a single word. I've tried all the ways of disciplining or rewarding to get him on track. He's in special education for speech and math support. The doctor diagnosed him with ADHD last month. We are working through getting the right dose. But for now, he made me miss my calculus class again because he refused to get out of bed this morning. I don't think I love him anymore. I feel like he's sabotaging my life and chances of getting out of the welfare system. I'm miserable with him in my life. I'm not a parent, but I have had my oldest niece, 4, almost 5 years old, basically 24/7, barring the few times every month or so that her mum will take her home for a 12-hour period. Since she was a year and a half old, at this point I am the only stable parental figure she has ever really known. I do not hate or dislike her per se, but I do resent her. I resent all the attention she requires. She wants eyes focused on her all the time, and when she feels like she's not getting enough attention, she becomes a holy terror. I know part of her attention seeking is because her parents, who live right next door, pay little to no attention to her. I know a lot of her behavior stems from them basically ignoring her. She's very, very loud and likes to make nonsense animal noises all the time. She loves pretending to be a dinosaur. She loves singing. She loves running and playing just like any other 4-year-old, but she does not get the concept of quiet time or indoor voices. I suffer from migraines, and I have explained to her every time I have one that I need her to play quietly until my emergency medication starts working. So I tell her to sit quietly and watch a movie or draw for an hour or so. And as soon as I lay down, she's in my face, almost yelling for me to play with her or watch her do something, etc. She's also a bit of a brat too. When she doesn't get her way with something, she immediately runs to my grandmother, who gives her whatever she wants. Toys, sweets, whatever. When she does get in trouble, be it for screaming non-stop or destroying something, this happens at least 4 times a day, if not more, or being mean to or playing too rough with cats and dogs, timeouts, spankings, sitting down, talking, explaining, rewards, none of it works. Any attention, good or bad, she wants it. When I tell her not to do something, the minute I'm out of sight, she's doing it. When I tell her not to pull on the dog's tail, she just pulls harder. When I tell her that she cannot smack the cat for not wanting to be pet or held by her, she chases the cat and corners him and then hits him when he scratches her. It doesn't help that I am literally the only one in the house that will stand up to my grandmother and put my foot down about her being disciplined. I am the only one that takes none of this little girl's bullcrap. Everyone else lets her get away with everything. Beyond all this, and as guilty as this makes me feel, I also resent her because during my last miscarriage I still had to take care of her. I resent her mother for this too, but I resent her because it does not matter to her that even though she was told I was sick, or even when she was sat down and someone explained what was happening, she still wanted me to play with her and would not leave me alone for longer than 20 minutes. I resent her because for months after my miscarriage she would still ask me when the baby would be here, and since it is now shortly after she was told the baby wouldn't be here, she is asking again. I understand that she's just a little kid, but it still hurts, and I feel guilty for that too. I resent her because even though I have no children of my own, I now have to live my life as if I do, which means now that I am working out of the house on third shift, I have to sacrifice my sleep in order to care for her. Because her mother won't, I resent her much more lately because every time I try to discipline her or work with her, she's taken to screaming in my face, "You're not my mummy, I don't have to listen to you." She needs therapy for her anger, for her attention seeking, for the neglect from her parents. She just does not know how to cope, and I don't know how to help her. Don't get me wrong, I resent her mother much, much more than I do my niece. In fact, I would go as far as to say that I hate her mother for all of this, for screwing up her child, for ignoring her, for expecting me to care for her kid, while imposing rules for how she wants her child raised, and tells her that she doesn't have to listen to me. I hate her mother with every fiber of my being. Every time I have to comfort her when she's crying for her mom because she misses her. I love my niece though. I love spending time with her and taking her to the park and making meals together and doing art with her. I love taking her to the museums and carnivals and movies. I love finding things to do with her that will teach her something or discover something new. I love that every day I find out something new about her as a person, and I love that we are so close. As much as I resent her for demanding my attention above everyone else's in the house, I mean, I live in a 3-bedroom house that 9 people reside in. There are plenty of people to play with. When I had my last miscarriage, I am also grateful for it. It would have been so easy to allow myself to wallow in the depression I fell into when it happened, but her excessive need for my attention made it to where I couldn't. All I could do was throw myself into taking care of her. My niece is intelligent and beautiful, she is strong and creative, and so very opinionated. I know that someday, if she gets some therapy, she will do great things. You know, I'm a strong believer in nuanced opinion, but some of these people writing about these kids just sound frickin' bipolar. Oh, I hate them. Oh, I resent them. Oh, but I love them and they're beautiful and they have such a great soul. I get it. You can easily fall into like disliking children very easily, you know. I get it. Parenting is the hardest thing, quite honestly. It's a huge frickin' sacrifice, whether they are disabled, like, you know, some of the other stories that we've heard, or like this, where it's just an attention-seeking kid. But my God, I just wish they wouldn't start with like as much as they like hate them at the start, and then it's like, oh, but it's all good, like, you know, they're great and everything. I just don't believe it at that point. I love my children to death, and I would never go back if I could, but I absolutely feel it is normal to have a moment here or there where you're not too thrilled to be a parent. It completely changes everything about your life, even when your children are average, let alone have disabilities that make things more difficult. My children have no behavior problems, no problems at school, no health problems, nothing like that. But it's still difficult. I still have moments where I am resentful, not necessarily of them, but of the loss of what my life used to be. It would be nice to not be a parent every once in a while, and I don't mean send them to grandma's for the day, because even when they are gone, you still have that responsibility. This might be one of the absolute best answers here, but it's also extremely vague. Like, I'll admit, for everything I just said previously, I do appreciate all of the, honesty that people kind of have with it. I live and breathe sports and activity. His mother was a personal trainer and I was a gym rat. Our first date was on a climbing wall. We got married in a canoe. We took trips all around the world. We lived life like a travel brochure. Our son was born with cerebral palsy and AMC, which basically means the joints in his arms and legs are locked up and will never move or develop. He will never walk or stand. He has limited use of his arms. We will never go fishing, canoeing, or hiking together. Everything that was so important to his mother and I's lives before him will never mean anything to him. In every way, he is so unlike me that I struggle to relate to him at all. When he was born, we both were in shock. He got RSV at 4 months and ended up in the PICU. He wasn't expected to survive. Honestly, his mother and I discussed it and quietly agreed that it would be best that way. We stopped visiting. He's 11 now. Mentally, he's above average. He gets A's in competitive private school. He competes in maths and spelling bees. I hated school. He is cheerful, kind to animals, and unfailingly polite. I was a sarcastic, rude little turd who butted heads with everyone. For some reason, he's still intent on impressing his parents, though I've rarely encouraged him. Despite all his wonderful traits, I still try to avoid seeing him because it makes me feel guilty, depressed, and disappointed. And I feel like crap about that because all his accomplishments tell me is how much I should love him. Anyone else would be thrilled, right? If not thrilled about the medical care, at least impressed with his achievements. I work long hours so that I can provide the best medical care he needs, the best education, anything material he could ever want, and so that I can stay away from him, because I know he knows. He tries so hard that sometimes I'm afraid it's all a front to make it easier for us to like him. Well, at least you can admit you're kind of a crap person. What made you go from meh to, oh crap, I need to see a doctor? I broke my butt. I slipped and fell down 2 steps of stairs. No big deal. My husband said I needed to fix my pants because it looked off from the back. I broke my sacrum bone above your tailbone, between S3 and S2, and it was sticking out. My doctor had to pop it in. There is nothing that can fix. I have a paralyzed tailbone. I can't feel it. I used to have agonizing leg pain and it would kill me to step sometimes. I chose to ignore it until I was scratching my balls one evening and discovered a lump. I was afraid I had cancer spreading and ran to the doctor. Found out I just had a weird growth on my nut that was not cancer. Leg still hurts though. 4 a.m. Drive heaving. Meh. 8 a.m. Kind of loopy. Have to catch my flight home. Noon. Get wheelchaired off the plane, escorted to connecting flight. 3 p.m. Landed in hometown, wheelchaired out to meet my girlfriend. 5 p.m. Shivering uncontrollably in a scalding hot shower. Abdomen pain so bad I couldn't even stand up straight. 5:30 p.m. Admitted to hospital, got scans and tests overnight. 7 a.m. Appendix surgery. Worst birthday so far. Worst birthday? I think the worst birthday I ever had was when I got hit in the legs with a baseball bat, like actually hit in the legs with a baseball bat when I was 10 years old. But at the same time, I also got a GameCube that day. So maybe not that bad. I passed out at work. I was in my late 40s and a heavy smoker and not much of an exerciser. After a crap ton of tests, my doc told me I had a mini stroke and if I really didn't want to see 50, to just keep up my bad habits. The smoke I had on my way to see him was the last one I ever had, and it's been going that way for 22 years. If you throw up coffee grounds and don't remember eating coffee, you are bleeding internally and should seek help immediately. I was an athlete in college and one time I was at lift, and when I was moving the bar from the side holder on the squat rack, I hit myself in the side of the head, just hard enough. I didn't think much of it, finished my lift and went home. I didn't feel great for the next few days. A few days later, after competing in a track meet, I was at a team barbecue and had the worst headache. After I left, I decided to do some homework with my friend, sat down in front of my computer, fell asleep for about 20 minutes, and when I woke up, I looked at my screen and I was like, holy crap, I can't read. I had a concussion. I was with a friend at a public pond in Boston. She was going to teach me to kayak. We were just getting into the water, barefoot of course, and washing off the kayaks, and she was going to teach me to get into it. I slipped on a rock or something and there was a sharp pain in my foot. Not bad, just real sharp, real quick. I went, wait, I think I stepped on something. Let me look. Lifted my foot up and the water was blood red. My friend was all, we need to get a better look at that. Get to shallow water. I'm going to find a first aid kit or something. I kept insisting it was fine. Really, it barely hurt, but you know how blood in water is. It looks like way more than it actually is. I sat down once the water was shallow enough and put pressure on. Someone came over and was all like, are you okay? And my friend had found a couple dudes nearby who were like, I got a first aid kit in the car, probably have some butterfly bandages in there. Let's see how bad it is. I brought up my foot out of the water and you could see the layers of skin and fatty tissue kind of flopping about. All 4 of the folks around me simultaneously went, ew, or oh my god, or something of the sort. We wrapped a sock around it, quickest thing we could find. Helpful dudes said they'd take care of the kayaks and my friend zipped me to the ER. I seriously did not think it was hurt that bad at all. It was very non-painful when it happened. The recovery was a nightmare, but when it happened, it didn't feel any worse than a small cut or something. In the ER, I'm sitting there with this sock around my foot, and the doctor comes in with 3 students following along behind him. They were in coats, he wasn't. He was all, okay, let's have a look. And he unwraps the soaking wet sock from my foot, not water, and I sprayed blood all over him. Even as he backed away, we're talking about a 5-foot arching spray of blood pumping with my heartbeat. It was kind of awesome, actually. Yep, severed an artery. The doc was like, well, that's what I get for not wearing my coat. I'll send you a dry cleaning bill. As the 3 students and him were leaving, one says to me, seriously excited, "We've never seen arterial bleeding before. Thanks." You're welcome. Medical students so weird. Bless them. When I was a kid, I used to like taking nice long dumps while playing on my Game Boy. I once stayed on too long. It felt weird. It felt like I was halfway through pooping out a giant turd, which makes you want to push, right? Yeah, bad idea. Apparently, your butt can fold itself inside out like a sock. I thought it was a piece of crap I could grab and pull out, so I wadded up a bunch of TP and tried to pull it out, but it hurt, so I started to panic. Screamed for my parents, went to the ER, sat in the ER waiting room with my guts inside out for a while, and when I finally got in, the doc had me lay down on my stomach. He had no idea what the heck to do. He said he might massage it back in. That phrase is stuck in my head for the rest of my life, and I just remember it folding back in. It was so uncomfortable and cold. Never happened again. It's called a prolapse, and it's awful. That was really hard not to laugh all the way through, but yeah, there's a reason why you shouldn't stay on the toilet too long. One day I went from, my hearing is muffled in one ear, to, now I'm deaf in one ear, to, the room is spinning and I can't stop vomiting. Went to the ER real fast at that point. Now the room has stopped spinning, but I never did get that hearing back. Leg pain went from a nuisance to not being able to stand up. Turns out it was stage 3 cancer. If I had waited another week, I would probably not be around anymore. My doctors did several different types of scans on me. They ended up finding a tumor the size of a grapefruit on the base of my spine. A few days later, they removed it, and I further had 6 rounds of inpatient chemo and a further 6 weeks of radiation treatment. The cancer was called schwannoma neurofibromatocytoma, and yes, I still have my leg. It was basically the same situation as the movie 50-50. Hey, my ankle looks a little swollen. 5 minutes later. Hey, everything under my knee turned into a purple elephant foot. Also, my pee is blood. Kidney failure. Not even once. Didn't have a period for a couple months, more like 6 months to be honest, and thought nothing of it because, well, didn't have to bleed for a week. Yay! Until I had cramps that made me crawl through the house and almost rip my mom's shirt while crying asking to be taken to the hospital. It lasted a couple of hours, but it had to happen twice for my mom to take me to the OBGYN. I went, did the exams, and she said it's totally normal. I had an ongoing period from the end of December to February, but in the last month I had normal periods, so yay! Throw away because TMI and I don't want to think about this after I post. A couple years ago, I noticed that peeing was starting to hurt. I assumed it was a UTI since I've actually had one before when I was much younger, and it felt similar. I heard that a good way to cure or treat a UTI was to drink a metric ton of water so you kind of pee away the germs, and that's what I did. A few days later, I couldn't pee at all, like nothing would come out. Even though I definitely had urine in my body, a panic attack or 2 later, I finally told my mom so she could take me to the ER. I was underage at the time and couldn't drive, and I was also in so much pain, I probably wouldn't have been able to drive even if I knew how. Did you know that catheters suck? Because catheters suck. I went through a lot of physical and psychologically uncomfortable tests, including an ultrasound because one of the possible causes was a cyst on my ovaries. We found nothing, like no causes at all. We had no idea what was going on. My urethra just decided it didn't want to pee anymore and clamped up, causing immense pain whenever something needed to pass through. Like a ton of water I drank under the impression that it was a UTI. Thankfully, there's a medication specifically for that sort of situation. It numbs up the urethra just enough that I could pee. That combined with the catheter probably saved my life. I wasn't anywhere near exploding bladder status yet, but I damn well could have been. Eventually. After a few days of taking the medication, I was fine, and I've never had that happen since. Kind of an anticlimactic end, to be honest, but it did go from meh to, oh, balls, I need to go to a hospital in the matter of a day or two. In college, just as we were about to start the summer vacation, we had a scheduled week to pick up our grades. This was before electronic grading and all this fancy stuff. We still rolled with report cards. I wasn't feeling too well. I barely could walk and had a head-splitting migraine. I was sure that I was at least 100 degrees Fahrenheit in terms of temperature and was starting to feel chills, all the flu-like symptoms at the start of the summer. I trotted through the day at uni, 6 hours going from class to class, building to building to pick up my grades. On the drive home, I was with my dorm mate who lives in the same hometown as me. We were driving with a family member, and I knew whatever was happening to me was serious as my vision was clouding, and I felt like I was being boiled from the inside. My mom's hospital was nearby and I knew the director personally. I asked the driver to pull over and take me there. By the time we were at the waiting area, I barely could walk and my dorm mates were trying to hold my head. I insisted she go home and ask my family members to fetch my mom. I used the excuse if I had the flu, I didn't want them to be sick. I called my mom, who was upset that I was faking sickness. I always was overly dramatic, but this really felt like death. She was rambling on the phone that I was pulling unnecessary stunts, and I kept saying, "If you want to yell at me, do it here," and hung up the phone. I went up to the director's office, who immediately saw something was wrong. Everything from this point was a blur. I spent 2 hours in the ER, had 2 IVs, and at some point was with a breathing tube. By the time my mom came, she saw me in the ER with all these machines and tubes hooked up, and I ended up being in the hospital for a week. I didn't fully wake up till almost 2 days later. I would come in and out of consciousness, but the bad times where I would have seizure-like coughing fits that wouldn't let me breathe, and back goes the breathing tube. Diagnosis: walking pneumonia with bronchitis infection. I must have had it days before. After I recovered from a slight fever and ignored me coughing up a little blood, the event weakened my already bad lungs so bad it took me a long while to recover. Developed epilepsy in my 20s and couldn't figure out what's been triggering them. A year and a half later and on stable medicine, I'm going on 3 months without a grand mal seizure. I've never had or seen a seizure in real life, but I imagine that is awful to have that regularly. I kept my contacts in for too long, had a headache, and decided to sleep it off. Thankfully, I took out my contacts because when I woke up, it seriously felt like I was hitting the skull with a baseball bat. Any amount of light hurt so frickin' bad. Rushed to the ICU where they looked at my eye and said I had a corneal ulcer. So now I have a very small scar on my eye. It doesn't affect my vision, but I totally learned from sleeping with my contacts in. I had recurring back pain for a couple of years. It would be really bad for a couple of days, then it would go away for a few months. Then last year it came back and didn't go away. I thought it was some kind of musculoskeletal problem and tried to push through it. When I couldn't breathe or walk without assistance, I went to the ER. Both of my lungs were collapsing with 800 mils of fluid on each one, plus some around my heart. Doctors were surprised I was still alive. Bent down to pick up mail I had placed on my stairs, stood up too quickly and got lightheaded, and an hour and a half later I still didn't feel right. Lightheaded, racing heart, shortness of breath, etc. My dad had gone through heart issues less than a year before, and I thought my mind was convincing myself that I was in arterial fibrillation because he had lots of episodes of it, and I knew a thing or two about it. Go to the ER? Yep, a fib. Several hours later, and 2 ineffective chemical cardioversions later, I got an electrical cardioversion defibrillation. They knocked me out, did some cardioversions, and I came around in less than 4 minutes. Woke up feeling like everything was normal again. They kept getting stronger, so I kept popping with Gravel, Pepto, and Advil. One morning I woke up with searing headache pain and reached for my extra-strength liquid Advil, and the bottle was empty. I polished off the whole bottle in less than a week. That's when I realized it was really serious. Turns out it was a brain tumor. Luckily, surgery fixed me up. When I googled what does throat cancer look like, and a bunch of pictures similar to the fleshy lump in the back of my throat came up. About to sleep and my tooth is feeling weird. Hurts a little, but nothing I can't sleep through. I wake up from a nightmare in a deep sweat and my jaw is exploding with pain. I stagger out of bed, somewhat delirious, and collapse on my kitchen floor in pure, unadulterated agony. I've had fingers crushed, bones broken, and skin badly burned before, but nothing has ever come close to how bad toothache hurts. My frickin' God, it was the worst time of my entire life. I had a hot pulp, and my dentist said it was the worst they'd ever seen. Had to have an emergency root canal. Look after your teeth. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm the type of guy that's like, no, I refuse to take an ibuprofen, a painkiller, or what have you if I'm in pain to some degree. It has to be really serious, but consistently. If I have an abscess or something or some kind of tooth pain, then I am just 100% down. Give me the painkillers, please. Level went from, oh damn, this is bad, but I can basically keep it together, to I can no longer give even the slightest appearance that I am okay. That and the EMT buddies I was hanging out with said they were legitimately concerned that I might be dying. Turned out it was a kidney stone. I had been in a minor car accident earlier in the day and hadn't gone to the hospital, so they were concerned that there was internal bleeding or something, and I was going to drop dead from it in front of them. One time I was at work and I felt a touch queasy. No big deal, I'll just sit down and try to eat something. That'll set me right. Nope. I straight fell out of my chair and started flopping around on the floor like a fish. Had a seizure for no reason at all, or none that the doctor could find. Had a killer migraine for weeks and was constantly dizzy, and I doubt I'll ever know why it happened. I had an annoying pain on the right side of my back that moved to the right side under my rib. I knew it was gas. The next morning it was still there. I laid down to move the gas. That made it worse. I started having horrible pain in the middle of my chest. Thought I was having a heart attack. Vomiting, etc. There was a point where I thought I was going to pass out because I couldn't take the pain anymore. A few days later, I was talking to my husband and decided to look up the symptoms because I was still a little sore. I went to the doctor and had to go to the hospital for an ultrasound. I had a bad gallbladder attack. Kinda gross, but my first bleeding UTI, I went from, I'll drink lots of cranberry juice to, oh no! I love cranberry juice, but you can't drink too much of it because it makes you spit all viscousy and horrible. I had rosacea. After around 5 years, I grew out of it. At around the same time as I stopped eating dairy. Then I decided I really missed cheese. The rosacea came back, but all over my whole face and neck, along with a strange, intense itchiness that I'd never experienced. And hives. Had my, oh crap, I need to see a doctor moment real goddamn quick. In December of 2007, I had a really bad calf strain. Got so bad I could barely put weight on it. I had a deep vein thrombosis, a blood clot in a deep vein in my leg, it turned out. My left leg started to lose feeling, first from at the toes and worked its way up over the course of a couple days. There was no pain, just tingling. No pain, no doctor, right? That's what I thought until I tried to stand up and my leg just buckled. Time to get that checked. Went to the ER, had an MRI, had a ruptured disc that, and I quote, obliterated my spinal cord, and I was hours away from permanent nerve damage or paralysis. Had surgery immediately, all is well now. Low-key, I'm so worried this topic is going to turn me into a hypochondriac. I just know that when I'm done reading this, the slightest pain in my body is just going to set off alarm bells. I was sore in my pelvis, think between my left leg and the base of my wiener. Thought I must have rammed it into the bag hooks while working behind the register. It didn't get better though, and I thought I must have kept running into it while I wasn't looking. I got to the point where I couldn't tie my shoes, run, or wear seatbelts. It also looked like a frickin' golf ball was under my skin. I was driving a Del Sol at the time, which was not an ergonomic masterpiece by any stretch of the imagination. It frickin' killed having to sit in that position. Working a clutch and wearing a seatbelt made it worse. I went to the doctor. Eventually, they found out I had a really agitated lymph node that couldn't be relieved. I had recently found out I was PAWS, and that can happen sometimes, even when the numbers look good. I needed surgery to remove it. Turns out it was the size of a robin's egg, which is apparently big for a lymph node. All the rest was swelling. No cancer, no nothing. It was just an agitated lymph node. I've been sick with mono for 2 weeks. I didn't go to the doctor or suspect anything was wrong until I woke up one day and I was jaundiced like crazy. Turned out the monovirus was attacking my liver and affecting enzyme production, making me throw up frequently as well. Got stung by a bee while riding a motorcycle on my way to work. My dad is very allergic and I'm a bit allergic myself, but only very rarely have serious reactions to it. Meh. Half an hour later at work, my bicep was uncharacteristically swole, like Arnie, and the veins in my arm were bright, inflamed, and red. Yep. Supervisor told me to get gone. I tried to find a doctor in the box that wouldn't take all of my savings, and after a bit of driving around with this ridiculous bee-stung arm, got treated. Fun times. I used to fall asleep in class ever since I can remember. Just thought, hey, school is boring. Fast forward, I'm 21 years old and still falling asleep in classes. Anytime I have to drive anywhere over an hour long, I'd have to pull over to take naps. Would fall asleep at work daily and just felt extremely exhausted 24/7. I just thought, hey, this must be what it's like to be an adult. Tired all the time and just wanting to sleep. Bet it'll only get worse from here. Then one day, I fell asleep mid-sentence talking to my boss. I played it off to him like I was sick and just passed out for a moment. Went to the doctors and did some sleep studies. Turns out, I have narcolepsy. I woke up for work on a Friday morning with a tickle in my throat. After work, I traveled to Boston for a pre-planned weekend trip, my throat and tonsils swelling more the entire time. I get home on Sunday not being able to swallow my own saliva without almost crying. I did cry at times. Monday morning, there's a massive blizzard and everything is closed, except a walk-in clinic. I forced my significant other to help me drive through 24-plus inches of snow because it was really unbearable. The doctor there said I had the worst tonsils he's seen in years, and that if it keeps swelling, I should go to the ER. Turns out I had a really bad case of tonsillitis due to undiagnosed mono. Vertigo. Was getting my daughter ready for school when suddenly it felt like I drank a gallon of moonshine and couldn't even stand up. Room spinning, the works. Meclizine is life now. Also, I can't ride simulators or use VR anymore. That kinda sucks. I got earaches a lot. Most of the time, I'm meh about it. Take some Tylenol and go about my life. One time in particular, though, it moved into an ear infection in under 8 hours. I've had ear infections before, but nothing compared to the pain I was feeling that evening. I paced around the room in tears for about 2 hours before giving up and going to urgent care, where I got medication for my ear along with pain medication. I'll never forget the exact moment that the pain medicine kicked in. It was absolute bliss. One night in college, I went to an exceptionally crazy forest party, drank way too much and ended up blacking out. I was obviously extremely hungover and in a lot of pain, so I went home, drank a bunch of water, and slept for a few hours. When I woke up, I had super intense pains in my abdomen, and I chalked it up to it being from my drinking. Fast forward 2 days later, and I'm in too much pain to leave my apartment. Every time I move, it's painful. After 3 days of this, and I go to the campus health center, they ran some tests but couldn't find anything wrong, but told me to go to the ER. When I go to the ER, they have no clue and give me fluids and send me home. I return in about an hour since the pain is so terrible. They do a colonoscopy and find out I have huge kidney stones. Took me another week with pain meds and prostate meds, I'm female by the way, to pass them.
What was your best or worst time in a game of Truth or Dare? In 4th grade, we were playing Truth or Dare on the bus home from school. Someone dared my friend to lick the floor of the bus, and sure enough, he did it. I thought about that moment the whole time he gave his class president speech at high school graduation. I played Truth or Dare with a mixed group of kids. I was spending the night at a friend's house whose older sister was also having a sleepover. We were 3 years younger, and we were at that age where avoiding the girls was the safest bet. I think 12 or 13. Anyway, the girls dragged me and my 2 friends into a game of Truth or Dare. After about half an hour of stupid dares, it got serious, and one girl was ordered to take me into the closet and make a man out of me. I was terrified and not even too sure what I was in for. The girl took me into the closet, sat down next to me, and held my hand, said we weren't going to do anything, and we just sat there for the next 20 minutes as the game continued on outside. I think she could sense how scared and embarrassed I was. They knocked on the door a few times, but she would scream at them to go away. The entire time we were in there, we talked about how stupid the game was and that she was sorry I got singled out. When we finally left after the others got bored with the game, she explained the whole thing away by saying that she just chickened out. And we talked to each other the whole time. The way she explained it, it didn't even become a thing. And the night was as uneventful as any other night. She saved me loads of shame and embarrassment at an age that would have ruined me. I love her for this, even though I don't know her name. I think this qualifies as both my best and my worst. Damn. Oh, damn, we are wholesome. We are getting wholesome up in here right now. So my friend has a party at his house, and nearly everyone was invited, including my crush at that time. My friend knew I had a crush on her, so when the dare came to me, that SOB dared me to leave for home, and I had to leave. One time in middle school, we're on the school bus and someone proposes to play a game of Truth or Dare. One girl stands up and says, "I'll kiss anyone on this bus except for him," while pointing at me. That was 16 years ago, and I still think about it. 1. Found out my crush had a thing for me. She chose truth. I asked her, "Do you want to go on a date with me?" Silence for a second, then a smile, then a yes. 2. Worse was when my dumb friend fell on me while doing a dare of jumping off the table, resulting in him breaking his ribs and my foot. Oh god, I basically had the exact same experience at a sleepover I had when I was a kid, where my hyperactive friend was jumping around all over the place and he jumped directly on my knee, and I hated him all freaking night. It made it really hard for me to enjoy my birthday gift of SSX on tour for the PS2. Although I actually wanted it on GameCube because you could play as Mario, Peach, and Luigi, I think, as exclusive characters for the GameCube version, but beggars can't be choosers, so whatever. I thought that was just cool at the time when I was a kid, video game crossovers. I was at a summer camp and we would all join with small groups that we would meet with in the morning after breakfast to help plan out the days. On the 3rd or maybe 4th day, we were all getting pretty close and decided to play a game of Truth or Dare. Our group met down by the lake and we were all sitting with our feet in the water, and someone was dared to catch a minnow with a net. Nothing crazy or anything. However, immediately after the minnow was caught, it was my turn, and I chose dare, admittedly, because I was hoping my friend would ask me to kiss my crush, who was also in our small group. Instead, being the little turd that he was, he dared me to eat the minnow, and seeking the approval of my peers, I did it and swallowed the minnow whole with my hot cocoa. If eating a live minnow wasn't bad enough, a couple rounds go by and my crush is dared to kiss me, to which she replied, "Ew, I'm not kissing minnow boy." That became my nickname for the next week and a half. I never got the kiss, to say the least, and I still wonder to this day if that's what gave me the tapeworm that they found a year later. I don't know what it is about that story, but for some reason it just sounds so goddamn real to me. New Year's Eve 1995. I was dared to kiss a guy that all my friends were crushing on, and I really wasn't. I smooched his lips and everyone was like, "That wasn't a kiss." So I went in deep and hard for a second one. I was 14 and he was 16. We've been together ever since. He followed me to college. I followed him out of state for work. We moved back home at 25 and 27, got married. Here we are in 2021, still together. It's so bizarre. Well, goddamn. Lady, I'm gonna need you to recreate that kiss because I gotta know what kind of voodoo magic you put into that to get that boy to batten down the hatches at the age of 16. I was around 14 and a girl from my school hosted a class party. I had hit puberty really early and looked pretty mature for my age, which came with getting a lot of attention from older guys, which made a lot of my peers assume that I had some experience and extra confidence. We played Truth or Dare and I was dared to kiss this boy in my class who hadn't hit puberty, had braces, and generally didn't match my maturing. I think he expected me to refuse, but I had actually been crushing on him and found him really cute, including that I hadn't actually kissed anyone before, despite what everyone believed. We both leaned in on all fours from opposite sides, and I could see the huge and boyish smile that formed on him, and it felt really safe and comfortable, and to this day, I'm glad that was my first kiss. So we had a group date thing and someone dared the entire group of like 8 people to share their kinks, and eventually someone said scat, and as I guessed it, party was over. We used one of those apps that gives you a question or dare randomly, and one person got the dare to hug the person to her right, me, and refused. I was playing with my 2 best friends and would really have liked a hug. I'm sorry to say, my friend, but clearly you were not hug-worthy that day. I was at a friend's birthday party. We were playing Truth or Dare. When it was my turn, I got dared to kiss this guy. He was my best friend's crush. I looked over to her and she hinted that it was okay. A few rounds later, it was the guy's turn. He got dared to kiss the girl opposite him. It was me. Then it was his turn again, but he had to spin a bottle to choose who he would make out with. Everyone was chatting or otherwise distracted except for me and that friend. He span it landed on my friend, but he span it again, and it landed on me. Back then, I had a crush on a girl that lives in the upper floor in the same apartment with me. One day, my mom and her friends were sitting in our living room and talking about some stuff while I was playing with other kids in my room. So we decided to play Truth or Dare. I was the only male in the group, and we were 6 kids around the same age, 11 to 14. Of course, my crush was sitting next to me. Suddenly, I found myself being asked Truth or Dare. I said truth, and the girl asked the question, "Have you ever bought a present for your crush?" And of course, I was an idiot, and without even thinking, I asked my crush if I've ever bought a present for her. Everyone went crazy, and I was still waiting for a reply. When I realized the shocking reality, I ran away from home and did not show up until I thought they would be gone. I still remember this being so embarrassing embarrassing and blaming myself for being an idiot. And for those who are saying it would have been smooth if I didn't run away, actually, you're right, but this whole situation was not planned. Also, for people wondering what happened next, I tried to cry but couldn't. After a few days in the neighborhood, all the girls were talking crap about me, and one of them was my sister. Also, my crush did not talk to me for some days as far as I remember. Lastly, now our moms still talk to each other, but we live in different towns, so I do not see her that much. I get it, man, when you're a little boy, why face your problems head on when you can run away? As Edward Elric would say, you've got a strong pair of legs on you. Use them to run away from your problems forever. I was given the dare to ask insert crush here out to prom over the phone since she was in quarantine and on speaker. So I called, turned on the video so all she could see was me. I grab a paper that says prom on it and the words she says shocked me. I've been waiting for this. Yes! And that is the best moment of Truth or Dare. I'm actually really appreciating how wholesome some of these are. It's not just teenagers asking each other to do debaucherous things to one another. I mean, there is certainly some of that, but most of these are turning out okay. Adolescence is a confusing time for everyone, and for 2 or 3 years, I was friends of friends with someone who I thought was cute but often mean to me. The saintly nerd boy who thinks the best of everyone. I went from being, oh hey, blank, to being quite anxious, feeling confused as to why I was seemingly getting picked on, and a little excited that I was the object of her attention, positive or otherwise. Time passes, and she ends up at a party where Truth or Dare is played, and maybe it's just 6 of us or fewer, but none of our common friends are there. We're asked to make out, seemingly to make me squirm, and it's only then that I find out I know nothing about the world and that flirting or being a little interested in someone takes many forms. I wouldn't see her many times after that, but the flipped switch in self and social awareness was appreciated, not to mention the making out part. A year ago, there was this party with friends, half boys, half girls, and we were extremely bored and decided to play Truth or Dare with this random app. And at first, the dares were just eat a banana with, pickle juice, and then it got real spicy with hug a girl or like hold hands for 5 minutes, which I wasn't expecting. I got the lightly kiss, and it was my crush, so someone had a good night. The time I was dared $200 to jump off my roof. Ow, $200 and a couple of broken arms later? I was rich and popular. The best game of Truth or Dare from high school ended up with one of my female friends wrapped up like a mummy in toilet paper. My best friend having a silly-looking face drawn on his chest and stomach. I had to eat a tablespoon of some gross concoction of condiments in that person's fridge, and I think one person had to stand on their head for as long as they could. Those are all the ones that are really memorable to me. The best time was me, male, 8th grade, playing Truth or Dare on the train home, except I wasn't playing. I was just doing my homework, sitting with all my friends. It was like 7 girls and 2 dudes, and normally we'd play Truth or Dare, and we've pretty much all kissed each other at that point. One of my friends, however, had an older sister, 2 grades above us, and her sister's friend was my crush. She had a ridiculous body, big lips, and wore super glossy lipstick, so every day was a struggle for me when she sat with us, and I usually resolved this dilemma by putting in headphones and doing my homework in solitude. Well, apparently she got hit with Dare, and one of my homegirls, the wingman, frickin' angel that she is, dared her to French kiss me for 10 seconds. Fam, I have had pecks, I have had basic kisses, but I have never done that up until that point. On top of this, I wasn't even playing, and I didn't even hear them. So I wasn't aware of any of this when she started doing what she did. So imagine you're me, sitting on a train doing homework when all of a sudden your crush, who you've been ignoring, gets frustrated, straddles you in a tight train seat, takes off your headphones, stares you dead in your eyes, and says, okay. You're sitting there like, what? And she just starts tonguing you. And I mean, she's really going in, and I'm like, what the hell, what the hell, what the hell, what the hell, what the hell? So my mini-me immediately hits her, and she blushes and gets off of me, but not before throwing my jacket over it. Saint. I can't remember most of the crap from middle school, but I will remember that moment forever. Worst time would probably be when one member of the group, there were 5 of us, admitting a ton of either dark or overly personal stuff on Truth. Like, you don't have to specify the gross SX thing you did or what illegal substances you have experience with. You can omit information that doesn't make the night better for anyone.
Worst, and I carry this almost 30 years, back when I was 12 or 11 years old, someone dared me to dance with a girl. I was so freaked out that I rejected. Later, that party, the girl asked me to dance, slow dance, and somehow I accepted. And that guy just screamed and clapped, "Well done!" I must say, he didn't mean any harm. Again, I freaked out, my shyness level skyrocketed, and I aborted the dance again. Since then, I didn't dance with girls, even had some hard times talking to girls romantically. And the next slow was with my newlywed wife and our wedding some 20 to 25 years later. I was dared to be hit over the head with a Coke bottle, one of those glass ones. Got a concussion. That's stupid. That's a stupid dare. The only kind of person that would make that dare to you is someone that actively hates you. When I was in 8th grade, I tried to enter in one game with some people in my class. I got expelled from the group. I was the weirdo outcast from my class. So I tried to play some games on my cell phone and listen to some music in my earphones. Just forget and chill. While I tried to find some music, I listened to the request from the group. Truth or dare? Dare. I dated Kiss Leo, my real name. Disgusting noises ensue. I just remember listening to this and going to the toilet to clear my head. I didn't cry. I was just mad and just tried to regain some emotional posture. When I came back to class to take my seat and just play some random music on my playlist, suddenly some girl came to me giving me a hug. I think maybe they wanted to say sorry or something. I tried to hug back, but I hear some giggling and I realized the kiss is too much, so they downgraded the dare to a hug because it's less disgusting. Well, that's just mean and unnecessary. Like, leave the guy you just ostracized out of it, you know? He's already having a bad time. When I was 22, I was dating a girl that was 21. She worked at a movie theater. She got invited to a party from people at work. Well, we go, hang out, lots of people drinking, so I think, naturally, everyone there is over 21. 18 at least. We play Truth or Dare after we all get utterly trashed, and I get dared to go into a closet with another girl. My GF is perfectly okay with it and is encouraging me to go. We go in, she's super nervous, and asks me a few questions. She says to feel more comfortable. Sure. So, what high school do you go to? What? So I ask her what she means. She says everyone there goes to her high school, but she didn't recognize me and knew that my GF liked to date, younger guys. Turns out, I was her first boyfriend that was older than her. All of her work friends were in high school too. Needless to say, I bolted out the closet, grabbed my GF and told her, what the hell? She and I broke up soon afterwards. I found out she had slept with a girl that was 16 years old at that party, while I was downstairs drinking with a bunch of minors. I haven't played Truth or Dare to this day.
Oh boy, looks like your girlfriend's a groomer.
But for real, after an experience like that, I probably wouldn't want to play Truth or Dare ever again either. As a kid, we used to play it quite often. I once had to kiss a girl I was loving in that time, and it was awesome. Next thing she got asked was who she loved. She said that she loved my best friend. I ran out of the room crying. At that moment, no one understood what was going on. I think they understood perfectly well what was going on. New Year's 2004. Ended up making out with every female at the table and nearly had sex with one, but a car crash kinda ruined it. To explain, we got a call about someone who we knew who had been in a car crash. Kinda killed the mood. Ah yes, car crashes. The #1 leading cause for blue balls in males. Why, if I had a nickel for every time a car crash had stopped me from getting laid, I'd have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. Best was daring someone to go over to our mutual friend who was setting up his tent and tell him it was put up wrong. Couldn't be specific in any way about what was supposed to be wrong about the way the tent was being put up, but just that it was wrong. I nearly fell out of my chair laughing when after a few minutes of being told they put their tent up wrong, they started to agree even though there was nothing wrong in the first place. I am a bigger guy than most, which makes this worse, and when I was like 14, I was dared to pole dance around an umbrella pole, and I don't want this to be so long, so let's just say that it snapped, and for the rest of the year, people called me fat. So, Pog? A girl thought it would be funny to dare me to kiss her feet for 30 seconds. As soon as I started, she started freaking out because it tickled. I was like, you said 30 seconds. So I held her foot there and continued, causing her to seriously regret her choice of dare. Later on, I dared her to run around the perimeter of the house topless. Good times were had by all. The times when I wasn't even aware of the game and people got dared to talk to me or even compliment me so they could laugh in private thinking I couldn't hear them making fun of me behind my back. School sucked for me, and that experience, among others, still heavily affects my social life and lack of social skills to this day. To the point I'm not even sure if this is a socially appropriate amount of information. Well, if it makes you feel better, at one point anyone who spent more than, a couple hours a day on the internet was basically considered socially inept at one point or another.
When I play Truth or Dare, I have an oath to never do truth. So every time I went, my friends could basically make me do anything. Eventually, when I was a junior in high school, I played a particular game where it started like, do something stupid. Then things started to escalate very quickly. Once it got to me, my friends tried to do me a favor and dare me to kiss my crush. As soon as he finished, she made a disgusting face and screamed, and I mean screamed, "Ew, no!" But oh frickin' well, because the next year we started dating, then we got married. We have been happily married for 5 years. So I guess task failed successfully. Okay, I'm starting to think there's one too many people who ended up in a frickin' Truth or Dare game, kissed someone in high school, and just ended up in a long-term committed relationship. Like, it's sweet, it's nice, really, but goddamn, how common is this? Asked this girl I kinda liked for a dare. She told me she loved me. Okay, and then we started dating. Basically, over the course of 1 year, demonstrated to me in no unclear term how much she wanted to, fellate her ex. I think you know how this ends. I also set my apartment complex on fire once. She was also the first girl I ever dated. Her ex was 6'4", reportedly super charming, super smart, and, yep. Literally, you versus the guy she tells you not to worry about. And I'm sorry, did you say you set your apartment complex on fire? Like, not just the individual apartment that you lived in personally, but the whole complex? You, like, displaced families and people? Like, goddamn. How? How? One of my friends and I had been secretly dating for a couple of months. This was like 20 years ago. So one day we were playing Truth or Dare with our group of friends, and one of the girls asked him to kiss any of the girls there. He had been the crush of almost all of us for a while. Well, he begrudgingly chose me, and we kissed, but we were so used to kissing by now that we didn't notice that the kiss didn't look that innocent from the outside, and that's when everybody knew that we've been seeing each other behind their backs. When I was 18, I was at a party in South Yarra, Melbourne, Australia, and these rich douchebags who got mum and dad to give them cash dared me $50 to do a handstand on the Chapel Street tram line. I was like, I'll do it in my underpants for $200. Suddenly 200 buckaroonies was produced, and I did a failed handstand in my undies. Turns out these rich douchebags were underage, so when I got my clothes back on and I was begged by them to buy booze, I said no. I later changed my mind and gave them each an apple cider. I would also very, very, very easily take that dare for £200. Ooh, this one's for me. After this one, I saw off Truth or Dare for a few years. Back in high school, I was at a beach party, and as the night went on, the game of Truth or Dare started up. That went in exactly the direction you'd expect. There was this one girl I had been crushing on for a while, and back to back, she got dared to make out with another dude. And then she dared me to kiss probably the least attractive girl there, which was also my first kiss for bonus pain. All in all, quite a gnarly turn of events. Well, buddy, if it makes you feel better, for all you know, that ugly girl, as you called her, might have had a magical night kissing a very handsome young chap. But at the end of the day, that's the risk you take with playing Truth or Dare, because it's kind of a stupid game. Played Truth or Dare in 10th grade. My crush also joined. They dared me to confess to my crush. I accepted and said it. She said nothing and continued to play quietly. My friends wanted me to be heartbroken. Yeah, not really good friends. They asked her to answer my confession. She chose truth, and she said yes to my confession. Best moment? No. Turns out she just wanted to know if her crush was interested in her. Not a good idea, I say. I dated her for 3 months before I figured it out, and her crush didn't love her back. So, worst moment for both of us? When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Linked in the description below.